I fell right into the water, and the waves immediately carried me away from the yacht. I panicked. I was a very bad swimmer. All sorts of horror stories about sharks immediately came to my mind. Help! Hey, wait! I'm here! No one heard me. The yacht was sailing further and further away, taking my chances of salvation with it. I had swallowed a lot of seawater, and tears were streaming down my face. It was the end. All of a sudden, someone grabbed my arm. Thinking it was a shark, I screamed and turned around. Hi, my name is Lana. I never went to parties and was always reading books. I was a nerd in college, and I was absolutely obsessed with comics. At first, I just liked reading them, and then I started coming up with and illustrating my own stories. I was massively inspired by Dan Evans, a famous comic artist, and I dreamed of becoming as cool as he was. One day, I was walking through college hallways and reading comics as usual. I turned the corner and suddenly bumped into someone. My book fell out of my hands. I looked up and froze. Damn it, it was Blake, the coolest guy in college, and my crush. Our classmates surrounded us, and someone noticed that my comic had fallen to the floor. They immediately started laughing at me. I wanted to sink through the floor with humiliation. I stared at Blake in horror and was silent. Hey, look at that. Blake's so handsome, he left our nerd speechless. Blake laughed. I'm not interested in such quiet and plain girls. That hurt me, and I ran away so I wouldn't burst out crying right in front of everyone. Wandering around the city, I decided I wanted to change, become bold and interesting. I walked into a cafe, sat down at a far table, and started drawing on my tablet. It had always helped me calm down. Then, I suddenly heard someone behind me say, "This looks amazing." I turned around and saw a guy with piercings and a bunch of tattoos. He sat down at my table and we got to talking. The guy's name turned out to be Henry, and he was a master at a tattoo parlor that liked drawing too. I looked at his tattoos and had an idea. What if I got a tattoo too? When I told Henry about my thought, he supported me and brought me to his tattoo parlor. We made a sketch together, and I came home with a tattoo on my neck. It looked very unusual and super cool. I decided that I wouldn't tell anyone about it just yet. The next day, I wore a jumper with a high collar to college. During a lecture, we were suddenly told that a week-long trip to Florida would be organized for the best of students. They read out the list of those who would go, and I heard my name. I always wore oversized clothes though, and I heard everyone start making fun of me. I bet she'll even wear a hoodie to the beach. I gritted my teeth with anger. I was so tired of those bullies. And I decided that one tattoo wasn't enough for me. They thought I was a shy nerd. I would show them all. After college, I went back to the tattoo parlor and told Henry I wanted to get more tattoos. He tried to dissuade me. You should think it over and not do it when you're so emotional. Get temporary tattoos for now, okay? Live with them for a while, and if you don't change your mind, we'll make them permanent. I thought about it and agreed. I drew all the new sketches myself. A few days later, Henry transferred them to my skin right before the trip. I felt like a completely different person. In Florida, our group checked into a hotel. I ended up in a room with Miley, my best friend. No one found her impressive either, which was probably why we'd become friends. I hadn't even told Miley about my tattoos yet. I had to lie and say that I wasn't feeling well so she would go to the beach without me. About a half hour later, I plucked up my courage and I changed into a bikini. I let my hair down and put on a cap and dark glasses. Then I went to the beach and slowly walked along the shore. Blake suddenly noticed me. He immediately started complimenting my figure and my tattoos. Just imagine, he hadn't recognized me. I slowly took off my glasses and smiled coquettishly at him. To say that Blake was stunned would be an understatement. Well, who's speechless now? Everyone was shocked by my transformation. They crowded around me and looked at me like I was a museum exhibit. Everyone really liked my tattoos, and only the prettiest girl in college called them tasteless. Nora, just admit that you're jealous. Lana turned out to have a very cool figure, and her tattoos are pretty great too. Nora turned green with anger, and I was over the moon. While we were hanging out on the beach, Blake was doing everything he could to please me. He brought me cocktails, adjusted my sunbed, and put sunscreen on my shoulders. The seawater could quickly wash away my temporary tattoos, so I had to sit in the sun. When we got back to the hotel, Miley came up to me, upset. Why didn't you tell me about your tattoos? I thought we were friends. I had to admit that only one of my tattoos was real, just so I could calm my friend down. One day, we were walking to the beach and saw an announcement about an upcoming palm tree party. The queen of the beach would be chosen there. Of course, all the girls immediately wanted to participate.
Lana, let's go to the party together.
Had I heard right? Of course, I wanted to, and I immediately agreed. However, when I was returning to the hotel, Nora suddenly blocked my way. She forcefully grabbed my shoulder and hissed, "Stay away from Blake." I looked at her defiantly.
Or what?
Or you'll regret it. It's pointless to threaten me. Blake likes me, so deal with it. I walked by the shocked Nora into the hotel. The same day, Miley and I went shopping. I was hoping to find a beautiful but not very expensive dress. We were exhausted by the time I finally got lucky. I would have never worn such a dress before, but that day, I liked it, surprising even myself. Back in our room, I hung it up on the back of a chair and went to bed, looking forward to the next night. Everyone would be stunned after seeing me. But in the morning, I was in for an unpleasant surprise. When I got out of bed, I saw something terrible. My dress had been cut up. I was shocked. It didn't take me long to guess who had done it. Of course, it must have been Nora. Ugh, she was so nasty. But she wasn't gonna get rid of me that easy. I went down to the reception and asked for sewing supplies. While everyone was out hanging on the beach, I drew a sketch of a new outfit and started to work on the dress. I was able to turn it into an original Hawaiian-style top and skirt. To be honest, I liked my new outfit even more than I'd liked the dress. Remember how I'd said that everyone had been shocked to see me with tattoos and in a bikini? Well, my appearance at the party had the same effect. Blake met me at the entrance to the beach, and when we appeared on the dance floor together, that was something. You should have seen our classmates' faces. Nora, once again, turned green with envy. Everyone was having fun, dancing limbo and drinking tropical cocktails. Then, the competition began, and all the girls lined up by a small catwalk. One by one, they walked in and posed while cool music played. We were told that the one with the loudest applause would win. Nora did great, but when I got on the catwalk, well, you get it, right? The beach exploded with applause. It was incredible. I had never felt so admired in my life. I became the queen of the beach and was presented with a crown made of palm leaves. I went to the bar to get a cocktail, and I suddenly noticed that Blake was nowhere to be found. After going around the whole beach, I still couldn't find him. Where had he gone? Then Miley came up to me. She looked kind of upset.
Lana, I wasn't sure whether to tell you or not, but come on, you've got to see this for yourself.
I was confused, but I followed her, and soon we came to a hammock hanging between palm trees. It looked like Nora and Blake were in it, and they were kissing? How was this possible? I felt so hurt. Blake pushed Nora away and got up. I didn't even want to listen to what he had to say, and I ran away. I didn't even notice that my palm crown had fallen off my head. I walked along the beach, crying my eyes out. I sat on a bench and realized that I really was a loser after all. What was the point of changing if Blake had just chosen another girl anyway? A man came and sat down next to me. At first, I got scared and wanted to leave, but he suddenly complimented my tattoos.
These are very interesting drawings. The artist must be talented.
Actually, I drew the sketches for these tattoos myself. The man looked surprised and said that if I kept practicing, I'd have a great future ahead of me. I suddenly realized that his face looked really familiar, but I couldn't remember for the life of me where I'd seen him. The next day, we had a boat trip planned. We arrived at the yacht and Blake came up to me to talk. You are such a traitor! If you liked Nora, you shouldn't have been flirting with me.
But I only came to the hammock because I was told you would be there.
I looked at him blankly. Who told you that?
It was Miley.
Miley? Why had she done it? After walking around the entire deck, I found Miley at the stern of the yacht, and I asked her about Blake. My friend's face twisted with anger. I had never seen her look like that.
Yes, I called Blake to the hammock and I ruined your dress. Nora asked me to.
Miley had conspired with Nora. Against me? I was speechless.
We used to both be Blaine, but lately, you've gotten so popular and I'm still a nobody.
Did she really do this all out of envy? I didn't want to lose my friend, so I tried to reason with her. Look, we're still friends. I'll forget about everything you've done, and everything can be just like it used to. I tried to hug her, but Miley suddenly pushed me away. I tripped and I fell overboard. The waves immediately started carrying me away from the yacht, and I panicked. I was a very bad swimmer. All sorts of horror stories about sharks immediately came to my mind. Help! Hey, wait! I'm here! But no one heard me. The yacht was sailing farther and farther away, taking my chances of salvation with it. I had swallowed a lot of seawater, and tears were streaming down my face. It was the end. All of a sudden, someone grabbed my arm. I screamed, turned around, and saw Blake. It turned out he had seen me fall and had jumped in after me. I wasn't that scared anymore. Soon, people on the yacht noticed. They dropped a life buoy and helped us get back on board. People immediately crowded around us. They wrapped me in a towel and started rubbing my arms. Miley suddenly appeared next to me and asked sarcastically,
How are your tattoos after swimming in the seawater?
even after everything that she had done to me, that betrayal came as a surprise. Nora immediately grabbed my arm and rubbed my drawing away. Of course, the tattoos started to fade. When everyone realized that my tattoos weren't real, they started to make fun of me again. I hoped Blake would stand up for me, but he looked disappointed.
I was amazed by how brave you were to have gotten so many tattoos. But you're just a liar.
Even him kissing Nora hadn't hurt me this bad. Yeah, my tattoos were fake. So what? Was it really that important? Back at the hotel, I had hidden from everyone by the pool. To get my mind off things, I'd been reading various comics on my tablet, and I suddenly came across a photo of my favorite artist. Looking at the portrait of Dan Evans, I couldn't believe my eyes. That was the man I talked to on the embankment. That was why his face was so familiar to me. Why hadn't I recognized him right away? There was no contact information of Dan Evans publicly available, so I had no way of finding him again. I had had a 1 in a million chance, and I had missed it. That made me feel even worse than I had before, and I burst into tears again. As we were leaving Florida, my classmates weren't paying attention to me or making fun of me. I came home in a terrible mood. Standing in the shower, as I was angrily washing off the remnants of my tattoos, I suddenly realized I wanted to get real ones. Not because I was feeling hurt, but because I had thought about it and come to a decision, just like Henry had told me to do. The tattoos seemed to reflect my inner world, and they helped me to express myself. So, the next day, instead of going to college, I went to the tattoo parlor. Henry was really happy to see me again, and he didn't try to dissuade me. So, in a few days, I had a lot of new permanent tattoos. As I was getting the last batch of them, a visitor suddenly walked into the parlor. I turned around and I froze with my mouth open. I thought I was dreaming. It was Dan Evans. It turned out that Henry was his nephew. I almost fainted from the news. Dan Evans suddenly took a closer look at me and smiled.
Oh, I remember you. You're that talented girl I saw in Florida.
I couldn't miss such an amazing opportunity again, so I asked him to take a look at some of my comics. Mr. Evans really liked them. He studied them for a long time, and then he made me a very surprising offer.
As you know, my name is well known in the industry. We could write up a contract. I could become your agent and recommend you to a publishing house.
If I hadn't already been sitting, I think I would have fallen over. We signed our contract the same evening, and the next day, I was on cloud 9 when I returned to college. Seriously, my dream had come true, so I was over the moon. When I walked into the classroom, everyone immediately noticed my tattoos. Nora started to make fun of me. What'd you do, rob a sticker store? I was kind of expecting that reaction, so I defiantly took wet wipes out of my bag and rubbed my tattoos with them. My skin turned red and the drawing stayed clear. Well, you satisfied? My classmates were stunned, again, and I felt like a real queen, even if my crown had been left somewhere on a beach in Florida. After the lecture, Blake apologized to me and suggested that we start over. But I was already over him. I wanted to be with a person who would love me for me, and not what I had. Henry and I saw each other each and every day. I was constantly asking him about my comics, and he promised they were gonna come out. One day, I went to a cafe and accidentally heard something on the TV. I usually wasn't all that interested in the news, but I heard a familiar name.
For many years, the identity of Dan Evans has been shrouded in mystery. But it recently came to light that he stole many works from young, talented artists and claimed them for his own. Right now, the charlatan has already been put on the wanted list.
I mechanically took a sip of my coffee without really tasting it. Still not fully realizing what I'd heard, I called Henry. His phone was unavailable. Then I went to the tattoo parlor, but the door was locked and the windows had been boarded up. How was this possible? I had been there just one day before. I started shaking. Could it be that I had been deceived? I couldn't believe it, so I waited for Mr. Evans or Henry to show up. But time passed and they were nowhere to be seen. One day, I went to a store and suddenly saw a familiar cover on the shelf. I had been the one to draw that. Those were my comics. My heart was pounding as I looked at the author's name and froze. It said Henry Wood. A month has passed since then. I filed a police report and even went to court. I was told that the chances of proving I was the author were very small, but I'm not gonna give up. Do you think that I can truthfully prove they're mine?
Hi, I'm Sandra, and I want to tell you about my cunning boyfriend. Last summer, Hugh and I went to a summer camp. The girls there immediately began to sneak glances at us, looking at me with envy and at him with curiosity. I was already used to it though. Hugh was very handsome, and many people didn't understand what it was that he saw in me. The same thing happened at the camp, but that time, a girl called Tina went way too far. At the first pool party, she openly stared at my boyfriend. I decided to annoy her, got out of the water, went up to Hugh, and hugged him. But for some reason, he abruptly pushed me away. Tina laughed loudly. I got angry, and I spent the whole evening hanging out with the other guys to spite my boyfriend since he decided to be rude to me. In the end, he couldn't let it stand and apologized. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. It's just that you were so wet and cold after the pool that I pushed you away. We made up. I suggested something cool, to get out of camp and spend the night on the riverbanks. We could take sandwiches, colas, and have a picnic. And then, but Hugh didn't let me finish and rejected the idea immediately. He was apparently very tired and wanted to get some sleep on his first day. Of course, it was unpleasant, but I agreed we would postpone it. Back then, I didn't know we'd have a fight so soon after that. The next day, a Mr. Muscle contest was announced for the boys at the camp. I was sure that my boyfriend would win, so I boldly applied for him. But Hugh got really angry. Why the hell did you make the decision for me? I don't want to participate. But he still had to, so he wouldn't seem like a coward. I felt guilty, so I decided I would support Hugh as much as I could. I even made a fan poster with his name, but he did not appreciate my efforts again and gestured for me to put the poster away. The participants stood in a line and grabbed the barbells on command. All the guys lifted them over their heads, but Hugh only lifted his a few centimeters over the floor and then screamed and grabbed his back. My mom worked as a massage therapist. She had taught me what to do in situations like this. I ran up to Hugh, laid him on the floor, and I took off his t-shirt. But when I started warming up my hands to do a therapeutic massage, Hugh jumped up and shouted, "Stop embarrassing me!" And that was the perfect moment for Tina to get closer to my boyfriend. And she took full advantage of the situation. That mean girl handed Hugh a bottle of water, let him lean on her shoulder, and walked him to his bed. That was the last straw for me. It wasn't the first time Hugh had snapped at me over nothing, and now he did it in front of that nasty Tina. I began to suspect Hugh had flirted with her behind my back, and now he was just snapping at me instead of telling me the truth. I suffered all day thinking about it, and in the evening, I decided I would go talk to Hugh. After curfew, I snuck up to the door to his room, but as soon as I came around the corner, it opened. Hugh came out with a huge sports bag and, nervously looking around, went somewhere. Well, that was pretty weird. I followed my boyfriend. He headed towards the beach and walked into a small room for cleaners. There was no staff there at night, but I immediately realized who must have been waiting for Hugh in that secluded place. Tina! I was shaking with fury. We had only arrived there just a couple of days ago, and Hugh had already found a new girlfriend? I decided I would ruin their date, and holding my breath, I looked through the window. I wish Tina had been there. Guess what I saw instead? My boyfriend was taking off his silicone suit, and with it, his inflated muscles and abs. Instead of the handsome guy I knew all the girls were crazy about, I saw some string bean. I laughed nervously, but then anger won out. This weirdo had been pretending to be Apollo and making a fool of me. I'd been dating a knockoff jock for a whole month, and he had to answer for that. I burst into the room and pounced on the frightened Hugh. At first, he blushed and silently endured my accusations. But then I guess he couldn't stand it any longer. You know, it wouldn't hurt for you to buy some kind of suit too.
One that would make you look curvier.
You're too skinny.
The only thing that kept me from dumping him right there were the other girls. I liked their envious looks, and I didn't want them to stop. So I decided I wouldn't rush it. I could always just break up with that liar later. Until the end of our time at camp, I was rather cold with Hugh. And when I came back home, my parents told me some cool news. We were flying south. My older sister Rose and I had never packed so quickly. The next morning, I was already admiring the ocean from the window of my room. The vacation was most welcome. I needed a break to sort out my feelings for Hugh. Who would have thought that on the first day of our holiday, I would find another crush? He worked as a lifeguard on the beach. He was handsome, like a movie star. I fell in love at first sight. All day I stared at him like a maniac. And then I decided I would get to know him. But the guy mistook me for a waitress and ordered a mojito. It was a complete failure. In our room, I told Rose about everything, and she promised to help. The next day, she sat down next to the lifeguard in a bar and started chatting with him about something. He immediately was interested in my sister. Of course, she had an amazing body, unlike me. Rose came back to me all pleased with herself. Rejoice, sis. I've worked it all out. Scott and I agreed to go for a walk on the beach tonight, but you're going to go instead of me. Try to make him like you. And I really tried my best. On the dates, I joked, tried to be clever. I even did the splits in the middle of dancing. But Scott didn't care. He just stared at his phone all evening and didn't even offer to pay for me at the cafe. And then he called me Sarah. Back in my room, I burst into tears. But that just made Rose angry. Quit whining! I'm not trying for nothing. Tomorrow you'll go and make him notice you. Understand? And the next day, I decided it was time for extreme measures. I waited until Scott had climbed up into his tower, went deeper into the water, and I started waving my arms. Save me! Help! I'm drowning! And I played my part well. Scott rushed up to me with no hesitation, and when he swam up, I relaxed and pretended like I'd passed out. Scott carried me ashore in his arms and laid me on the sand. And I knew the most interesting thing was gonna happen. Mouth to mouth, I tasted his salty lips, opened my eyes, and jumped up in horror. It wasn't Scott, but his scary colleague. I cursed and started spitting. Scott shook his head disapprovingly and left. My plan had failed again, and it looked like I had no chances left. I spent the entire day sipping cocktails at the bar with a sad look, and in the evening, I trudged back to my room. Near the hotel, I saw something unexpected. My sister was sitting on a bench next to Scott. I hid behind a branchy palm tree and overheard their entire conversation. I thought I asked you to play along. She was so upset. I'm sorry, but your sister is, how am I gonna put it? Ugly and skinny. I couldn't even pretend that I was interested in her. I realized what had happened. Back then on the beach, Rose hadn't even tried to trick him. She had just openly asked Scott to flirt with her ugly sister. Why was everyone around me lying? I ran back to our room in tears. When Rose came back, I told her everything I thought about her, but she didn't even apologize. I just wanted to raise your self-esteem. Otherwise, you would have ruined my entire vacation with that ugly face. We had a terrible fight that night, but the scariest thing was, I started worrying about my looks. While my entire family was sunbathing on the beach, I stayed in my room looking at my figure in the mirror. Why hadn't I noticed that I was so flat and angular? I looked like a child. Long story short, I came back home feeling really insecure. The first thing I did was meet Hugh and agree to his idea. Do you remember when you told me about your special suit? The one that would make me look curvy? I agree. Please, show me where to buy it. After trying it on, I was delighted and I spent all my pocket money on the suit. After the holidays, a completely different Sandra came to school. Beautiful and confident. The girls bombarded me with questions. Wow, how have you changed so much over the summer? Fitness and proper nutrition work wonders. I spent my holidays in the gym, and here's my result. Boys couldn't take their eyes off my new figure. Even Charlie, the most popular guy in school who had never paid any attention to me before, began to flirt with me. Things were going great, but then something ruined my mood. Tina, the girl that had been Hugh's biggest fan at summer camp, was transferred to our class. At school, she continued to chase my boyfriend. At first, I glared at her, but by the end of the day, I realized that I didn't feel anything anymore. I wasn't jealous. After all, I knew what kind of body was really hiding behind all his fake muscles. In just a week, I became the most popular girl in the school, and I started to distance myself from Hugh. When he invited me somewhere in the evening, I lied and I said my parents had grounded me, so I'd be staying home and studying. He believed me and comforted me. Meanwhile, I was going on dates with Charlie. Our relationship had developed really quickly. And one evening, he even kissed me outside my house and handed me some kind of postcard.
It's my birthday tomorrow. I'll be waiting for you at the water park.
That made me worried. I'd be exposed if the suit got wet, but it really would have been stupid to refuse. So I accepted the invitation with a smile and decided I would just stay away from the water. The next evening, I stuck to my plan. While everyone was splashing and having fun on the sides, I was drinking Coke and eating pizza. But soon, Charlie gathered everyone at the bar.
Guys, let's come and take a picture.
Everyone stood close together for the photo, and I was in the center, right next to the birthday boy. The photographer gave us a signal and pressed the button. And at that moment, the worst possible thing happened. My silicone suit fell off. I screamed and I covered myself with my hands, but it was too late. Everyone had doubled over with laughter. Even the photographer couldn't help himself. I snatched the camera from him, and I saw who was to blame for the biggest shame I've ever felt in my life. It was Hugh. He had stood right behind me and unzipped my suit. What a sneaky guy! And stupid, since he thought I would just leave it at that. I clapped my hands to stop all the laughter of my classmates, and I shouted, "This was all Hugh. It was his idea. Do you think that's really his actual body?" Of course it's not. Look. I grabbed my bully by the stomach and I pulled. The skin turned red and Hugh cried out in pain. But I'd seen everything with my own eyes. How was that possible? I laughed nervously and I ran to a locker room. There, I sat down on a bench and burst into tears. Less than 5 minutes later, someone sat down next to me and took my hand. I was sure it was Charlie who had come to comfort me, but it was Hugh.
I'm sorry, that was harsh.
But you really hurt me.
Yesterday, I came to your house with flowers to ask your parents to let you out, but they said you weren't there. I waited for you outside and I saw you kissing that idiot Charlie.
I felt really uneasy. It really did sound bad when you put it like that. I should have broken up with Hugh before trying to date another guy. I wiped all my tears away and I asked him how he had managed to pull off that body trick.
Oh, that's easy. I was wearing the suit, but I was also working out at the same time. When my real body finally looked like the suit, I threw it away.
I felt like such a complete idiot. What do you call a girl who's foolishly lost such a catch? I imagined Tina next to him, and I felt jealous again. I absolutely had to make up with Hugh, even after all of this. Let's forget everything. Come to dinner tonight. We'll make up.
Before Hugh could answer, though, Tina's head appeared in the doorway.
Well, are you coming? I missed you. Hugh let go of my hand and said,
I'm going to the movies with Tina tonight, and we should break up.
He left, and I was alone. Everything had taken care of itself. I would be with Charlie, and he was really no worse than Hugh. I washed my face, put on my makeup, and went out to the pool. But Charlie was already flirting with some other girl. I had lost at my own game. I had fallen for the good looks, and now Charlie had found someone way more beautiful than me. I threw that stupid suit in the trash and I went home. Rose suggested that I apologize to Hugh and try to get him back. What do you think I should do? Hi, I'm Margot, and I had a pretty terrible childhood. Mom and Dad didn't really care where I was spending my time or even what I was doing. They fed and clothed me pretty terribly, and my classmates constantly bullied me. It was no shock that I grew up to be a reserved teenager. The only thing that made me happy was singing. I tried to convince my parents to get me a vocal coach, but they just said, "We don't have the money for that kind of nonsense." But they always had enough for all sorts of parties. Of course, I was really hurt. I wasn't gonna give up on my hobby. I always sang at home, which infuriated my parents. Usually, they just turned on the TV really loudly to try and drown out my voice. But one day, they went too far. I'd been in a great mood that night. After all, I was supposed to compete in a music contest on stage for the first time that next day. I had been practicing a Rihanna song in my room when my dad burst in looking really annoyed.
When will you finally shut up? We have guests. They're all annoyed by those awful wails.
I promised I would sing quieter, but my parents still weren't satisfied with that. And in the end, my mom grabbed me and threw me outside.
Just sing your stupid songs here. When you get cold, knock.
We'll let you back in. I ended up standing outside in my pajamas. It was snowing and an icy wind was blowing, so in just a few minutes my teeth were chattering. But I wasn't gonna give up, so I sang for almost an hour until I finally lost my voice. And then I knocked on the door. My hand was shaking so bad from the cold, and for some reason, no one opened. I started banging on the door with all of my strength, and when that didn't help either, I jumped up and tried to look in the window. My parents were asleep on the couch, and their guests had passed out right at the table. Everyone had just forgotten I was there. I couldn't feel my legs anymore, and I turned blue all over from the cold. So, out of desperation, I dug out a big stone from the snow, and I started to swing it to break the window and climb inside. But all of a sudden, a neighbor called me over to the fence. "Margot, what are you doing?" I ended up telling her the whole truth, and that kind woman let me stay the night. She even gave me hot tea and wrapped me up in warm blankets and put me to bed. "When you wake up, I'll take you to your parents." I fell asleep, feeling happy. However, in the morning, I saw a man instead of my parents. He brought me to an orphanage, and I was so scared I couldn't focus on what was going on around me. I don't know how much time I spent there before I was finally sent to a foster family living in another state. The Bakers turned out to be good people. Mrs. Baker was a vocal coach, and seeing my talent, she helped me train my voice and even taught me how to play the piano. I immediately liked her son Jacob, and at first, we were just friends. But by the time we'd grown up, we'd become a couple. And long story short, my life was really great. But I did really miss my parents, no matter how badly they had treated me. I was sure that this whole time they had probably been looking for me, and they probably really regretted what they'd done. So as soon as I came of age, Jacob and I packed our clothes, came to my hometown, and rented an apartment. Jacob got a job, and I decided to do what I'd come back for at once. I went to my parents' house. My heart was pounding when I saw the familiar front yard. Almost nothing had changed despite the years that had passed. However, I wondered, who was that girl? As I got closer, I saw that she looked a lot like me. My parents had probably given up on finding me and had just had another child. And that's when I met my sister. Rita turned out to be a very friendly girl. She told me that she loved to dance, but her mean parents wouldn't let her practice and constantly turned off her music. I was upset. What had happened to me hadn't taught them anything. I was listening to Rita and trying not to cry when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Rita, how many times have I told you not to talk to strangers?" With a smile, I turned around and I spread my arms open to hug my mom. But she just frowned. "Oh, it's you. Well, come in if you want." That was not how I'd imagined our meeting would go. I followed my mom into the house, but she folded her hands in front of her and, without even offering me anything to drink, asked, "Look, why are you here? Do you need money? Here, take it." Mom took a thin wad of money out of the closet and threw it at me. "Just don't come here again, please. The child services won't leave us alone because of you. They're constantly coming to see how Rita is. And please, don't tell her that you're her sister. There's really no need to upset her." I threw the money on the table and stormed out of the house. I could barely hold back my tears and everything around me was blurry. But somehow, I managed to get back home. But I still burst into tears. I was hysterical, breaking all the dishes and collapsing onto the bed with no strength left in my body. Jacob only barely managed to calm me down. And from that day on, life lost its colors for me. I stopped smiling, stopped taking care of myself, stopped cleaning the house. The apartment just didn't feel like home anymore. At first, Jacob tried to support me through my depression, but then he got tired of my sour face. He started to stay late at work more and more often. And one day, I found out why. That day, I was shopping at the supermarket and I saw Jacob. He was holding some girl's hand and choosing drinks. I didn't make a scene. I had no tears or emotions left for that. I just went home, sat down at the piano, and started singing. The notes and the words came to me all by themselves. And that's how I composed my very first song. It turned out sad, but so beautiful. I closed the piano lid, packed my things, and I put the engagement ring on the dining room table. But then I bumped into Jacob at the door. He understood immediately what was going on without me even having to say anything.
"I'm sorry, Margot. Please, stay here. I know you have nowhere to go, and the apartment is paid for until the end of the month."
Jacob left by himself, and I was all alone. I had to find a job to keep living somehow. So I opened my laptop and started looking through the vacancies. But then someone rang the doorbell. Did you forget something? But it wasn't Jacob standing there.
Miss Evans, I finally found you.
My guest introduced himself as Peter White, an employee of a law firm. He handed me his business card and a folder. Inside were some documents and a key to a safe deposit box. I'm sorry, there's probably some kind of mistake here.
Not at all. You probably don't remember your grandfather. You were very young at the time. Mr. Evans was very rich, but also terminally ill. He saw the kind of lifestyle your parents led and made you, his granddaughter, the sole heiress to his fortune. You can only get it now that you're an adult.
This all seemed like some kind of joke to me. I spent the evening trying to digest this news, and in the morning, I went to the bank to check everything. I was led to my safety deposit box. I took the key, opened it, and I shouted for joy. There was a ton of money inside. In just one day, I'd gone from struggling as a beggar, abandoned by everyone, to being a rich woman. And that, of course, called for a celebration. I had lunch at the most expensive restaurant in the city, shopped in luxurious boutiques, and visited an amazing spa. At night, I went to an elite nightclub. I only made my way back home in the morning, tired but blissfully happy. I was about to go to bed when I got a message. I almost dropped my phone in surprise. It was Rita. She had suggested that we meet. I sent a taxi for my sister, and in a couple of hours, I met her at my house. She hugged me and said through her tears, "I heard your talk with Mom, and I know that you're my sister. I have no one else to talk to. Living with them is awful. They pretend to be caring parents, but that's only when child services come to visit. They don't actually care about me." I understood Rita like no one else, and I promised that I would make sure things were better for her. And we chatted for several hours. Rita turned out to be such a kind and cheerful girl. I decided I would share a secret with her, and I sang the song that I'd composed after Jacob's betrayal. Rita filmed my performance on video, and when I finished, she suggested that we post it on TikTok. That was so cool, sis! You could totally become popular! But I was pretty afraid of getting hate comments. I'd had enough negativity in my life already, so Rita couldn't manage to convince me. In the evening, I walked her home and I went to bed. And in the morning, I woke up to the sound of countless notifications. Rita had sent me a ton of joyful emoticons and stickers, and when I opened the link she'd sent me, I jumped straight out of my bed. That little trickster had posted my song after all, and it got 2 million views? From that day on, a new life began for me. I started writing songs, filming TikToks, and getting thousands of likes. My audience grew at a furious pace. I invested my grandfather's money into improving my skills, recording songs in professional studios, filming awesome music videos, and taking even more vocal lessons. And only a year later, I had become a real star. I collabed with famous musicians and appeared on the most popular shows. Even top bloggers reposted my performances. As you've probably guessed, I became ridiculously rich. The first thing I did was send part of it to my foster family for all the good they had done for me. And Peter and I started dating again, and even got married after a while. We bought a luxurious mansion in Beverly Hills. Rita started visiting us every weekend, and I was happy. But then something ruined my mood. That day, I returned from a tour, and I saw my parents near my house.
Margot, dear, forgive us. We've realized how wrong we were to you.
Mom started crying and reaching out to me, looking pitiful. But a cheap trick like that wouldn't work on me. I knew perfectly well they only wanted money from me. So I asked my security guards to show the uninvited guests out. However, getting rid of them wasn't that easy. My parents started following me and appearing everywhere I went. At home, at concerts, near my studio. I just had to start pretending I couldn't see them. But one day, I got a strange call from child services.
Miss Evans, your parents were in a car accident. Come take Rita or she'll be sent to an orphanage.
I'd never been so scared. I arranged for Rita to be brought to me immediately, and a couple of hours later, I was already hugging her. Yes, my sister was safe, but I still felt so uneasy. I felt bad for my parents, even after everything they had done, and I wanted to give them a third chance. So I used my connections to find out which hospital they were at, and I rushed over there. When I walked into their ward, I screamed and I dropped my oranges. Mom and Dad were sitting in wheelchairs, all bandaged up. Tears ran down my face. I knelt down and I hugged my parents, even though we had never been close before. I decided I would do everything so that Mom and Dad could get back on their feet as soon as possible. I paid the doctor, and my parents were transferred into the best ward. They started to give my parents the most expensive medicines. My parents' phones had also broken in the accident, so I gave them brand new iPhones so they would always be in touch with me. And most importantly, I bought them a house in Beverly Hills next door to ours, so I could always take care of them with no issues. After they were discharged, my parents moved, and we began spending time together, just like a normal family would. At Christmas, I decided I would surprise them. I put vouchers for a trip to the Maldives for wheelchair users in a sock, and I snuck into their house to hang up the gift on the Christmas tree. But then, I suddenly heard someone open the door. I hung up the sock and I hid in the closet to see my parents' reaction. However, something terrible happened. Mom and Dad suddenly jumped out of their wheelchairs, took off their bandages, and opened a cocktail bottle. Dad raised his glass and said in a solemn voice,
"To our doctor, Mr. Scott, who confirmed our beautiful story to that absolute fool."
My world collapsed again, but I wasn't gonna cry. I refused to feel sorry for myself anymore. I jumped out of the closet and I told my parents everything I really thought about them just then. And after I kicked them out of the house, they took Rita away from me. Not because they loved her, but just because they wanted to spite me. My sister was crying and begging me not to leave her, but the law was on the side of our parents. Ever since that day, Peter and I had only been thinking about how to get Rita back. But even with my connections and his legal talent, nothing worked out. We were getting really desperate when I suddenly got another call from Child Services.
"Miss Evans, your parents were in a car accident again and are badly injured. They're in hospital right now. Please come and take your sister."
I was all too happy to bring Rita home. Of course, I didn't believe a word they said about my parents. They were so lazy they hadn't even come up with a new scheme to get money. It made me so mad. I decided maybe I would finally punish them for their blatant lies. I took the police with me to the hospital to expose those liars, and I burst into the ward. But I didn't see what I'd been expecting to see. Mom was lying on the bed, crippled and helpless. All she could do was blink. I wasn't even sure she actually recognized me. In a trembling voice, I asked the doctor where Dad was. But he just lowered his eyes to the floor and put his hand on my shoulder.
"My condolences, miss. Your father died in intensive care."
I'm faced with a choice once again. Should I take care of my mom after everything she's done? Or maybe I should try to forget about her and live my own life with Rita. What do you think I should do?
Hi, I'm Kate. After my parents got divorced, I didn't want to spend time at home, so I was going to parties all the time. During one of these evenings in a bar, 2 girls came on stage, and they started to move so nicely that I couldn't look away. To be honest, I was a little envious. Boys only had eyes for those dancers. They didn't pay any attention to me, as usual. After finishing their hot dance, the girls moved to the bar and suddenly invited me to join them. They introduced themselves as sisters, Alex and Susie Wood.
We perform here every day, but we've never seen you before. We need a third participant for our team in a twerking championship. You look pretty hot. Why don't you try it?
I was delighted, and I showed the girls my abilities, but my moves only made the bartender and the sisters laugh.
Kate, stop. We get it. We'll start with the basics. There really are no other options anyway.
The next day, I went to a dance studio. Susie and Alex turned out to be patient teachers. It was only after a couple of lessons that I realized how to shake my booty properly, and I gradually got better at it. But I started to spend less and less time at home because of my new hobby. And in the end, Mom started asking me questions. I lied and I said I was going to drama school. She was a teacher at a ballet school, so she definitely would not be approving of my new hobby. A month later, though, I got good enough to perform in a nightclub for the first time. I was really worried. When I saw what I would have to dance in, I started having second thoughts. The costume was too short and tight, but the girls quickly convinced me.
In this outfit, all the guys will be yours. That's what you came to us for.
The Wood sisters turned out to be right. When I went on stage, guys were practically drooling. It was the first time I'd found myself in the spotlight, and it felt really damn good. But all of a sudden, someone grabbed my leg. I fell and I was dragged into the audience. How rude! This was not how fans were supposed to behave. I dusted myself off, jumped to my feet, and I got ready to scold whoever had grabbed me. But instead of some guy, I saw my mom. Her festive hat didn't match her menacing gaze at all. Mom took me away from my friends, and you should have seen what started then. "What are you doing? Why are you shaming our family?" And so on and on and on and so forth. I got tired of listening to it, and
So I said with a malicious smile, "I just like twerking more than your boring ballet."
And for some reason, my mom got really hurt about that. Such an idiot is no daughter of mine. You better be moved out by the time I get home.
Why was she so harsh? So what if I forgot about her birthday once and danced in a nightclub once? Was that really a reason for her to kick me out? I was so angry with my mom, I didn't even argue. I just packed my things and I drove myself to the nearest hotel. I didn't really have anywhere else to go. I still resented my father for leaving us. But I had enough savings to live in a hotel for a whole month with no issues. During that time, I got even better at twerking than my teachers. Alex noticed and put me in the center. Now, the whole performance revolved around my twerking. And that only meant one thing. It was up to me to make sure our team would be chosen to represent our state at the national competition. And finally, the day of the performance came. I was so worried, and I looked out from behind the curtains to assess the strength of our competitors. And I've gotta admit, those girls did great. They even brought their coach on stage to the applause of the audience. I was so shocked that I dropped a water bottle on my foot. It was my mom. I couldn't bring myself to perform, and I just left to my own shame. How could that be? My mother, a ballet star, had suddenly gotten interested in the modern dancing that had made her kick out her own daughter. In the hotel, I sat on the bed and I burst into tears because of this injustice. But soon, my sobbing must have annoyed one of my neighbors. There was a knock at my door. "I'm sorry. I'll try to keep it down." But some guy came in, sat next to me, and patted me on the shoulder. "Hey, I'm Phil, the bartender. Do you recognize me? I liked your dance." I wiped away my tears. At least one person liked it. Phil handed me his phone. But in that video, I wasn't twerking at all. I was twisting my hips like an idiot and waving my arms like crazy. It had been filmed in a bar right before I met the Wood sisters. I laughed and I was about to give him his phone back. But then, I saw something curious on the screen. My friends were standing right behind me. Alex was pointing her finger right at me. I asked Phil, "Do you like how these two dance? They perform at your bar all the time." But he said that dances like that weren't popular in the bar, and he'd only seen them once. The same day they had added me into their team. Well, weird. Why did Alex and Susie lie about performing there? Spending time with Phil was fun, though, and soon I forgot all about my suspicions. It turns out that he was from another state. He'd used to rent an apartment, but he moved into a hotel closer to his work. We exchanged numbers. I tossed and turned all night, replaying the latest events in my head. And in the morning, I came to the dance studio to apologize to the girls for leaving the day before. But they didn't even listen to me. Alex showed me a certificate allowing them to go to the final and said angrily, "We won without you. It turns out replacing you is easy." Alex pointed at some girl. When she turned around, I opened my mouth in surprise. She was a grown woman, much older than us. The oddities didn't end there. The girls kicked me out of their team and demanded that I pay for every lesson they had given me. But why? I thought we were friends. "Yeah, sure. Why would we bother teaching such an awful dancer for free? An ungrateful one, too." And that's how our short-lived friendship came to an end. Now I owed the sisters a ton of money. Phil lent me some food. I could no longer afford to stay rightfully offended. So I decided to save up on rent and move in with my father until I had what I needed. Dad was very happy to see me. He fed me a delicious dinner and gave me a room. Everything was going great until I started unpacking. I found a picture of Susie and Alex in one of the drawers, and I laughed nervously. Were they following me? I ran downstairs to talk to Dad. He said he wanted to introduce me to his fiancée because she had just returned from the store. A woman came in, carrying packages. I recognized her even before Dad said, "Kate, meet Linda Wood." My dad was dating my former friend's mom. That's why the girls had found a replacement for me so quickly. That's why there was a photo of them in the drawer. Our meeting at the bar was not an accident. There was no way. But why had their family set up everything like this? I decided I would figure it out. I repacked my suitcase and I went back to the hotel, even though Dad tried to stop me. The first thing I found on social media was the schedule of the performances for the trio, and I got lucky. The dancing group, Panthers, as they called themselves now, was giving a show that evening in the same club where my mom had humiliated me. Behind the wall, Phil was preparing to go there for his shift. I asked him for a favor. "Please, can I go in your place? Just for one night? I really need to find something out." And, well, earning some extra money really would not hurt. At first, Phil hesitated, but I managed to convince him. I washed off my makeup, put on a fake mustache, and I hid my hair under a baseball cap and I put on men's clothes. So, in the evening, it wasn't Kate who stood behind the bar, but a cute guy called Kurt. And I didn't have to wait long for the Panthers to appear. The spotlight shone on my stepmother and stepsisters, and they performed pretty well. After the dance, Alex and Susie came up to the bar, just like clockwork. I was mixing cocktails for them and eavesdropping. But, as luck would have it, the sisters weren't talking about anything important. I decided it was my time to act. I playfully twirled my mustache and I hit on the fools. After they had been completely charmed by my compliments, I asked them, "Where's your third member? That ugly blonde girl?" And the sisters' eyes lit up. Talking over each other, they told the handsome bartender the whole truth. And that's how I found out that our moms had gone to the College of Choreography together and hated each other because of a guy. After graduation, my mom chose to pursue ballet, and Linda Wood picked modern dance. That guy was my dad. He married my mother. However, many years later, he met the girl that he'd loved in college and left my mom for her. But that hadn't been enough for Mrs. Wood. She'd put together a team for her daughters and sent them to lure me to her side. That toad wanted me to leave my mom with no support system, to take away her only daughter. And even worse, she'd succeeded. I hated them with all my heart, and I barely stopped myself from revealing my true identity. But I got a grip, and I spilled my cocktail on Alex, pretending it was an accident. The sisters got angry and left, and I calmly finished my shift and returned to the hotel. Now, it was clear to me why Mom had trained those girls for the twerking competition. Back then, at the club, she had seen me with the daughters of her enemy and decided to at least beat Linda Wood at one thing. She would prove to herself she was better than her opponent. I felt so bad for my mom. I told Phil everything. We spent the night thinking of ways to help her. And in the morning, the plan was ready, and I came home to make up with her. Mom greeted me with a stern look, but when she found out that I knew everything, she softened a little, especially after my promise. I won't go twerking in nightclubs anymore if you do as I say and you don't argue. We got into Phil's car and we drove to his home state. The teams for the final were being chosen there. Twerking wasn't nearly as popular there as it was in our state. Only a few teams performed it, even though they weren't great. Just a couple of my moves were enough for the jury to choose our team. It was too easy. But I knew what kind of battle I was in for in the final, so I decided to do something risky. The rules of the competition said that there had to be 3 people in a team, but nowhere did they say what exactly each member was supposed to do. So, in our team, everyone did what they did best, and we spent a lot of time getting ready. Finally, our moment came. The Panthers did great, as always. Mom was very nervous, but my fighting spirit was infectious. Let's go. We'll beat those mangy cats. And we absolutely obliterated our competitors. I twerked, Mom danced next to me in point shoes, and Phil played music for us using drumsticks and bottles. He always entertained himself that way when there were only a few people in the bar. We were given a standing ovation. The jury members unanimously chose us as the winners of the competition. But the Woods didn't even get into the top 3. During the awards ceremony, I saw their faces full of envy in the audience, and I waved my hand spitefully. I was sure that Mom was also beaming with joy on the pedestal, but for some reason, she didn't look that way. On the way out, I asked her what the matter was. She stroked my cheek and said sadly, "Linda won in the end. After all, your father chose her." But the contest still helped us a lot. We got a lot of money. I paid off my stepsisters, and I rented a small dance studio not far from home. There, we started teaching girls how to dance. I taught twerking, and Mom, ballet. We almost stopped fighting and started spending time together more often. My personal life got better too. I no longer had to go to clubs in weird outfits to find a boyfriend. After all, Phil and I had become a couple. Besides, remember, I promised my mom. Now, I only twerk in gyms and at competitions. But one day, my father came back into our life. He appeared on the doorstep with his things, and he asked us to let him in. He said he had nowhere else to go. What do you think I should do? Hear my father out or send him away to his second family? What do you think? A warm breeze, soft sand, and a girl in a beautiful swimsuit who everyone is admiring. Who is she? Well, it's me! Hi, my name is Joy and I'm 19. I live in a coastal town, so the beach is a big part of my life. I often have fun here with my friends. And of course, I take part in beach beauty contests. I always win because I am perfect. Last year, I took a special course and I became a lifeguard. You see, as a child, I really loved watching movies about brave superwomen who helped everyone in trouble. My favorite actress, Lily Bully, she did all of the stunts herself and always looked so beautiful that I dreamed of being just like her. While all the other contestants were preparing for the upcoming Miss Bikini contest, I was quietly basking in the sun and enjoying admiring glances that were thrown at me. Absolutely no one could compare to me. But all of a sudden, Valerie, my best friend, leaned over me and happily waved some kind of flyer. It's good that you're lying down, Joy, or you would have fallen after hearing this. Just look. This year, the winner of the contest gets a jet ski. Valerie and I hugged because we both know that first place would be mine. Valerie always supported me in beauty contests, and I cheered for her at surfing competitions. And today was a very ordinary sunny day. I changed into a lifeguard swimsuit and I took my post, when suddenly I saw a girl flailing in the water. Help! Save me, please! I immediately grabbed a life ring, jumped into the water, and I helped the poor girl get to shore. Luckily, she hadn't swam far, and she didn't look like she was injured. Are you okay? I can't swim. I got so scared when my leg cramped up. Thank you. Her name was Abby. She said that she had recently come to the beach in our city to prepare for a beauty contest. I wanted to condescendingly wish good luck to yet another competitor who didn't stand the slightest chance against me. But after carefully examining Abby, I realized that this time I would probably need some luck to win. After all, Abby's body was no less perfect than mine. I shared my worries with Valerie, who smiled and slyly told me her plan. She wanted me to beat Abby at the talent contest because that would give me the most points. I'll give you surfing lessons, and then you can beat everybody up there. I imagined myself conquering the waves in a cool swimsuit, everybody applauding and Abby turning green with envy. And I hugged my friend, thanking her for such a wonderful idea. Oh, Abby will never know what hit her. The next day, instead of teaching me how to ride the waves, Valerie started telling me about the basic rules of surf etiquette and wave types. But why would I need to know all that? I just needed to win over the jury with a 5-minute performance. Moreover, there were only 2 days before the contest. I demanded that Valerie immediately teach me how to stand on the board. Alas, I turned out to be right. The jury and the audience were delighted with the new participant. But I also had a trick up my sleeve. I was confident I would be in the first place after the talent contest. But then, Valerie decided she would ruin everything. She came up to me with a worried look and asked me not to get on the board. Don't do it, Joy. The waves are way too big for a beginner today. Don't worry. Nothing is gonna stand between me and my victory. Full of confidence, I picked up the board and I walked straight into the water. The waves were a little bigger than when we'd practiced, but so what? I looked amazing, and that was the most important thing. All of a sudden, though, a huge wave picked me up and carried me to shore with unprecedented speed. I got scared and I wanted to move away, and that's how I got in the way of some guy. Well, how was I supposed to know you weren't supposed to do that while surfing? He'd shouted at me to leave, but it was already too late. He crashed into me at full speed. I could feel his board hit me painfully in the leg. I lost my balance and I fell into the water. The last thing I remembered was the face of the guy diving in after me. And then I opened my eyes and saw the hospital room and the worried faces of Valerie and the guy from the beach. His name turned out to be Dean.
Of course, it's your own fault for getting on the board without learning the rules first, but I'm still sorry it happened.
I waved the apology away nonchalantly. Things happened. It's fine. The most important thing was that everything had ended well. Okay, let's just go back to the contest. Dean and Valerie looked at each other tensely for some reason. I tried to get out of bed, and I realized that my leg was in a cast. It was broken. A doctor came into the room and explained that it was a clean break, and I was lucky I'd only have to spend a month in a cast. That's when I snapped. Only a month? My flawless body is now ruined! And it's all because of you two! I turned to Valerie and I yelled at her. After all, she was the one who had convinced me to learn how to surf. Now, I had realized she was always just jealous of me. She'd been waiting for an opportunity to mess with me. And that Dean? Where even had he come from? I hate you! You ruined everything! Dean and Valerie looked at me resentfully and left the room. Whatever. I didn't want to see them anymore anyway. Soon enough, my mom arrived and took me home. She didn't say anything, but I could see on her face how much I'd upset her. At home, I decided I'd get my mind off things by scrolling through Instagram. But I got even more upset when I came across Abby's posts. She had won the jet ski, and now she was posing with it on the beach, while I was sitting alone in my room. It was so unfair. The only thing that could cheer me up was a shopping spree. So, as soon as the crutch was delivered to me, I went to the mall. But instead of admiration, I only saw pity in the eyes of passerbys.
Oh, that poor thing. So beautiful, but she's got a crutch.
I went into my favorite boutique and I began walking between the clothes racks. Except I really hadn't gotten used to being so clumsy yet. The crutch caught the hem of the dress on a mannequin. It swayed and fell, and I hit the ground with it on top of me. A security guard immediately came running to my screams. But instead of sympathizing with me and helping me up, he got upset that I had ruined the dress and chased me out of the store. I came home in tears and I told my mom everything. But she also yelled at me instead of offering comfort.
What were you even thinking when you did that? Look at the bruise on your arm now. At this rate, you're going to ruin your perfect body. You have to be more careful.
Of course, that made me cry even harder. Mom's words really scared me and made me think. I decided I wouldn't leave my room at all until the end of the month. That way, nothing bad could happen to me. Of course, I really missed going to the beach and hanging out with my friends. I was so happy when they finally took off my cast. The doctor said that the bone had completely healed, so I could go back to living my normal life. I left the doctor's office and was skipping to the exit when I ran into a man drinking coffee right in the middle of the hallway. Nothing terrible happened. He didn't even spill his drink. But the hot coffee still could have spilled on my face and burnt it. I shivered all over, and I reached the exit with careful steps. On the porch, I saw a boy playing with a ball. When he saw me, he smiled and threw the ball for me to catch. Don't you dare do that! What if your ball had left a bruise on me? I suddenly realized that the world was full of dangers I'd never seen before. There was an accident that could ruin my gorgeous good looks lurking around every corner. I didn't feel safe at all until I got to my room. During the month I'd spent there, nothing bad had happened to me. I firmly decided I would never leave my room again. And that way, I wouldn't have to put my beauty at risk. I was taking a few photos for a new post when Mom walked into my room, followed by Valerie.
Joy, honey, I know you and Valerie are fighting, but I'm very worried about you because you don't leave your room. You just stay on your phone all day. Maybe she can convince you to come out.
After those words, Mom sighed and left us alone. I don't understand why Mom is unhappy. She asked me to be more careful herself.
I think you're being a little too careful, Joy.
Making up was hard. But we got to talking, and Valerie told me about all the many interesting things I'd missed while being holed up in my room.
It's such a shame you couldn't see Abby clumsily riding her jet ski. She's constantly falling into the water. She can't swim, so she always wears this bulky, ridiculous inflatable jacket. Come on, Joy. Would Lily Bully's character in that movie have given up so easily?
We had such a great time together that I remembered how many good and fun things were outside. I'd completely forgotten how brave and active I used to be. I guess you're right. I can't stay in my comfort zone my entire life. The next day, I came to the beach and I realized how much I'd missed the bright sun and the soft sand. I changed into a swimsuit and I decided I would go for a swim. However, as soon as I walked into the water, I immediately squealed with pain. I ran out onto the shore again to see that my leg was terribly flushed. I had been stung by a jellyfish. This was proof. As soon as I left my room, something happened to me. Something bad was always gonna happen to me. I even knew this time right away who to thank for this.
Oh, I'm so happy you're finally back. Oh, what happened to your leg?
I was stung by a jellyfish. I shouldn't have listened to you. You're just envious because I'm prettier than you and you want something bad to happen to me. I didn't even give Valerie a chance to defend herself. I don't need friends like that. I turned around and I hurried away. But then I suddenly ran into somebody's surfboard. Of course it was Dean's. He smiled when he saw me, but I was not at all happy that we met again. Last time, I'd broken my leg against his stupid board. So now, out of anger, I pushed it away from me. Who knew what else could have happened? It fell on all the other surfboards out there, and they kept falling, like dominoes, until they reached the stand with the inflatable life jackets. I heard a quiet puff, like a balloon had deflated, and I just hurried away. I didn't want to be forced to clean up all of that. I sat down on a sun lounger next to some old woman, and I angrily crossed my arms over my chest. I resolved to never get up from my seat. Or even better, I would just go back to my room and never leave ever again. Might I ask what upset such a beauty? I told her all about my troubles. She smiled and handed me an ice pack to put on my burn. Do a couple of scratches and bruises scare you so much that you're ready to live a boring and monotonous life? But this way you'll always be beautiful. The old woman sighed with disappointment and turned to look me in the eye. For some reason, her face seemed kind of familiar to me. While all the other girls on the sets were using stuntmen, I performed every stunt myself. Yes, I got bruises and scratches, and I even got a scar. But did it make me ugly or make my career any less successful? That's when I realized who was sitting in front of me. Lily Bully was my childhood idol. I'd always dreamed of being just like her. I'd wanted to ask her a ton of questions and even for an autograph, but I suddenly heard a noise in the water. It was Abby, who had lost control of her jet ski and had fallen into the water again. She was waving her arms around in a panic because she was wearing one of the life jackets that had been damaged by me. Abby was in danger, but what could I do? After all, I would suffer myself if I tried to save her. Lily Bully, as if sensing my worries, patted me on the shoulder. Of course, someone will help your friend get to the shore, but you will either conquer your fear or always hide away from life in a safe room. The choice is yours. That's when I ran to the water, faster than I'd ever run before. I reached Abby in just a matter of seconds. I helped her back on her jet ski, and we returned to the shore together. An admiring crowd was already applauding me there. First, I apologized to Valerie and Dean. Abby promised that she would learn to swim. That way, she wouldn't get into trouble like that anymore.
Still, I don't really get it. What made you change your mind?
Oh, I completely forgot to tell you! I pointed to the sun lounger where I'd met the movie star, but it was empty. Lily Bully had probably left to rescue those in trouble. Afraid of losing my perfect appearance, I had almost lost myself and all of my friends. Luckily, I had realized just in time that I was wrong, and I didn't let my fears trap me in my comfort zone. Tell me, how have you been able to cope with your fears?
Hi, my name is Zoe. I'm a cheerleader. We recently performed at a football competition to support our school team. We were even on TV. When I came back home, the first thing I saw were my terrified parents. My mom's older sister had called. She was strict and unbearable and had worked as a teacher her whole life. My mom had always been afraid of her. We lived in different cities, but now my aunt was going to come and stay with us for a while. I was terrified. I still remembered our rare meetings from when I was a kid. It had been the stuff of real nightmares. My parents and I decided that I would pretend to be an obedient girl in front of her to avoid conflicts. I dressed simply and cleaned the house, but my aunt still found something to be displeased with. Why are there stains on the dishes? And on the mirror? Zoe, why would you choose such a terrible nail polish? I was grinding my teeth with anger and barely held back from saying something rude to her. The next day, I had a sore throat, got a fever, and didn't go to school. Of course, my aunt immediately started to tell me what I should do to get better. Her fruit drinks and bitter teas just made me sick. Luckily, she was only at home in the mornings and evenings and disappeared somewhere else during the day. One day, I got a call from Julia, my best friend and the captain of the cheerleading team. She told me our school had a new principal who was absolutely awful. She set up stupid rules and constantly yelled at everyone. What a bummer. Like I didn't get enough of that from my aunt. One day, my boyfriend Frank came over. We were hanging out in my room when my aunt suddenly came home. First, I heard her voice downstairs and then footsteps coming toward my room. Damn it. If she saw me with a guy, I would be done for. Frank had to quickly get out through the window and climb down a nearby tree. After a couple of days, I got better and went back to school. Before the first lesson, the new principal came into our classroom, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I almost fell off my chair in surprise. The new principal turned out to be my aunt. She announced that from that day on, everyone at school would have to wear a uniform. Then she gave us sets of clothes and all the girls grimaced. The uniform was terribly ugly. The boys agreed that it sucked. During a break, everyone started discussing the new rules. It turned out that the principal hadn't just introduced a new uniform. Just imagine, she had disbanded the cheerleading club. All the girls were furious, especially Julia. She suggested we wear miniskirts to school as a protest. All the cheerleaders supported her, but I had to keep silent. I didn't know what to do. On the one hand, I was pretending to be a good girl in front of my aunt so as not to create trouble for my parents. But on the other hand, I didn't want to argue with my friends. So far, no one had guessed that the new principal was my relative, but if they found out about it, I would be in a world of trouble. The next day, I put on a uniform. Of course, my friends immediately pounced on me. They were very angry because I hadn't stood by them. We were talking in the hallway when the principal suddenly came up to us. "Why aren't you wearing your uniforms?" The girls immediately said they refused to wear them. So the principal yelled at them and told them to clean the classrooms every day after school as punishment. The new principal made everyone in school hate her in just a week. As soon as someone broke the rules, she immediately appeared nearby. It was like she had a nose for rule breakers. The cheerleaders, led by Julia, began to come up with a plan to get rid of her. They were angry with me because of the uniform, but still hung out with me and Frank. Everyone decided that since the principal was so prim, we had to drive her crazy by breaking the rules so that she would be unable to stand it and leave. One evening, a couple of my classmates snuck into school. They drew graffiti on the walls next to the principal's office and hung a poster with her Photoshop portrait on its door. When the principal saw it in the morning, she was livid. She found the artists and made them scrub everything off. How had she found out who they were so quickly? Soon, Julia got a new idea. She secretly filmed the principal on camera, made a funny edit of the video, added trending music, and posted it on TikTok. The video quickly went viral, and the principal became a meme. Our computer genius added the video to the school website and made it impossible to remove. You should have seen how furious my aunt was, and how much we laughed at her. However, she quickly found out who was at fault again. She threatened the genius with serious problems, and he had to remove the video from the website. We wondered again, how did she manage to find the rule breakers so quickly? Despite everything, Julia decided we couldn't give up on cheerleading. Every day when the principal left school after classes, we trained in the gym. I often missed practice so that my aunt wouldn't find out anything. Because of that, my relationship with my friends became even worse. That worried me, but I didn't know how to fix it. Frank often worked out in the gym with the cheerleaders and helped Nerdy Charlie as well. One day, the cheerleaders came up with a new idea. Julia recorded the sound of the school bell on her phone and hid a Bluetooth speaker in the hallway. She turned it on right in the middle of classes to disrupt them. The school was a mess. The principal was freaking out and couldn't figure out what was going on. However, by the end of the day, she found the speaker and punished the girls again. I was in for an unpleasant surprise at home too. My aunt talked to my parents and told them that my classmates and I were completely out of control. "You have to focus on raising Zoe. She has to be grounded." I saw that my dad was very annoyed with my aunt. He held back for the sake of my mom, who didn't want to argue with her sister. As a result, my parents scolded me, but only for show. Of course, I wasn't really grounded. It seemed like my dad would have been happy to join us in our quest to drive my aunt insane. One day, the principal announced that a committee would come to our school in a few days. "Don't even think about pulling anything. You have to wear your uniforms and show proper manners to make a good impression." Naturally, we were going to do the opposite. To lure the principal into a false sense of security, the cheerleaders wore their uniforms for the next few days. The classrooms and hallways were clean since everyone was getting punished all the time. The principal was satisfied. She thought we had given up. How naive of her. In the evening before the arrival of the committee, I stole the key to the principal's office from my aunt. The girls and I snuck into the school and made a mess there. We smashed the flower pots, spread dirt over the floor, and scattered garbage everywhere. Then we got into the principal's office and put all the papers in the wrong places. The next day, everyone came to school dressed like they were at a rock concert. The girls wore bright makeup, and the boys had put on torn jeans and t-shirts with skulls. When the committee walked into the school, we turned on heavy metal on the speakers. The committee was shocked. The principal opened her mouth, choked with indignation, and did not even know what to say. That was exactly the reaction we were hoping for. The members of the committee told our principal that they wanted to speak with her in private and left our office looking very displeased. Hooray! We did it! Overjoyed, the cheerleaders performed their routine right in the hallway. I was glad too. Maybe if my aunt was fired, she would finally move out? After school, Frank invited me for a walk. We hung out in the cafe, then came to the park. We were sitting on a bench and kissing. All of a sudden, we heard my aunt's annoyed voice right next to us. "Zoe, what are you doing?" Damn it. I couldn't believe I was so unlucky. My aunt was very angry after the day she'd had. She threw a fit and yelled at Frank. Then she grabbed my arm and started pulling me along. "You have no right to do this to me. You're not my mom and I'm already an adult." You're still going to school, which means you're a child. Your mom needs me to knock some sense into her as well, since she's letting you date whoever you want. At home, she brought Mom to tears. Luckily, Dad was at work, or the day would have ended much worse. The next day, there was a rumor at school that the principal was going to be fired. Nobody saw her in the hallways. She did not come to lessons, and everyone rejoiced. After school, I came to the cheerleaders practice. Charlie didn't show up that day, and Frank was working out by himself. Everything was going well. The girls had almost forgiven me, and we were talking like we used to. However, in the middle of practice, the principal suddenly walked into the gym. She wasn't surprised when she saw us at all. She had definitely known we would be there. Someone had ratted us out, but her arrival didn't scare Julia. "Well, what are you going to do to us? You will be fired soon." The principal smirked. "Who told you such nonsense?" The members of the committee were horrified by what was going on at the school. They decided that only a principal like me could handle it. We were stunned by such news. So we had been wrong? We hadn't succeeded and she would be staying? The principal suddenly looked right at me and did the thing I was most afraid of. "Zoe, your behavior is simply unacceptable. Yesterday you were kissing a guy and today you're jumping in a miniskirt with pom-poms. My niece shouldn't act like this." There was silence in the gym. Everyone was looking at me, and I felt terrible. I wanted to sink through the floor. After the principal left, the girls crowded around me and accused me of lying to them. "Traitor! You must have been the one to rat us out to your aunt. That's how she always found the rule breakers." "It wasn't like that. Yes, she's my aunt, but I want her to leave as much as you do." No one believed me except Frank. My friends boycotted me, and my boyfriend was the only one who supported me. He had guessed everything in the park when the principal had led me away. I couldn't help but burst into tears right on the porch of the school. Frank hugged and comforted me. I wanted to make up with my friends and get rid of my aunt. I couldn't think of anything, but one day my mom accidentally gave me an idea. We were having lunch when a spider suddenly ran across the floor next to us. Mom laughed and said that her sister would have fainted if she had seen it. She has always been terribly afraid of insects. If she sees even a tiny bug, she immediately screams. When I got to school, I asked Julia if we could talk. At first, she didn't want to listen to me, but then curiosity got the best of her. I told her about the phobia of the principal and shared my plan. After school, we discussed everything with the other girls and decided to act the next day. I bought a bag of insects at a pet store and brought them to school. When the principal left her office, we sneaked there and put the insects into her bag. Then we hid around the corner in the hallway and waited. When the principal came back, we came closer and watched her through the half-open door. She was looking for something in her bag when she suddenly screamed loudly. She dropped her bag to the floor and the insects spread all over the office. The principal grew hysterical. She stopped shouting only to suddenly clutch her heart and sink to the floor. Everyone was confused, but Frank quickly realized what had happened. He ran up to my aunt, sat down next to her, and gave her first aid. I came to my senses and called an ambulance. My aunt was taken to a hospital. When she came to, I went into her room. I felt a little ashamed because we had brought her to such a state. I want to apologize for everyone. We went too far with the last prank. My aunt pursed her lips and looked at me, annoyed. "I didn't expect anything else from you. You will never amount to anything." After such words, I no longer felt sorry for her. I hoped she would admit she had been wrong too, but nothing of that sort happened. Soon, a doctor walked in. He said that if it hadn't been for Frank, things would have ended much worse. But even that didn't change her opinion of my boyfriend. "Your Frank is just like everyone else. There's only one good boy among you. Charlie will definitely become someone." I tensed up. "Charlie? What does he have to do with anything?" "He's the only one who didn't take part in your nonsense. He even helped me and told me every time someone broke rules." So that's who had ratted us out. Wow, Charlie! Even after Frank had helped him work out. The doctor said that my aunt shouldn't be stressed out. She needed absolute rest for at least a month. After being discharged from the hospital, she was about to leave. I cautiously asked if she was going to come back to our school. "Certainly not. Your principal just went on vacation and asked me to fill in for her. We are old friends. One of your teachers will act as your principal until she comes back, and I've had enough." So my aunt hadn't just come to visit? She had wanted to help a friend? By the way, I hope that the cheerleading club will stay closed. I saw your performance on TV and immediately decided my school wouldn't be known for something so disgraceful. Had she seen that broadcast? So that's why she had immediately closed our club? Before leaving, my aunt demanded my parents make sure I behaved from then on. Mom almost burst out crying again, and I couldn't bear it any longer. Look at how many people you have turned against you. What if you are the problem and not everybody else? You are a mean tyrant, and there's nothing wrong with cheerleading." My aunt opened her mouth in surprise. She looked at me in shock for several long seconds and then turned to my parents. "Did you hear what she said? I warned you, it's all your parenting. You've let her get away with far too much." My dad suddenly interrupted her. "Enough. We've been patient for a long time. I completely agree with my daughter. I hope we won't see each other again soon. Have a nice day." My aunt was upset and turned to look at my mother, but Mom amazed everyone. Instead of keeping silent or agreeing as usual, she took our side. "Even though we are relatives, you should stay out of my family's business. We have our own life here." My aunt looked indignant and said that we were ungrateful and wouldn't manage without her help. My dad quickly kicked her out. For the first time in recent weeks, we breathed a sigh of relief. At school, I told Frank about Charlie. He cornered him, and that traitor confessed to everything. He had wanted to curry favor with the new principal, so he had ratted us out. I made up with Julia and the other girls. The cheerleading club is open again, and I am still a member of it. My aunt doesn't call us anymore, and we are very happy about it. Do you know any people as unbearable as my aunt? Tell us in the comments down below.
When I was preparing for college and my sister Mia had just started high school, our parents' restaurant went bankrupt, and our family ended up with no money. Our life fell apart, and I hit a rough patch. Hi, I'm Polly, and this is my story. You probably know that when it rains, it pours. My parents informed us that we would have to move from our big house to a small apartment to help pay off our family's debts. Dad managed to buy an old van with the money he'd saved, and he turned it into a diner on wheels. Only that didn't end well for me. After all, my parents couldn't afford to hire anyone, which meant that they were counting on my help. We'll all have to take turns working at the diner to make ends meet. Of course, except Mia, because she needs to study. I have to pass exams to go to college, though. I can't work either. By the way that Mom looked away, I realized that there was more bad news to come. It turned out that the money that had been set aside for my college was being used to pay for Mia's expensive private schooling. I felt like I was the only one in the family suffering. For Mia, life hadn't changed at all. Our parents worked 7 days a week, and Mia went to school every day looking excited. So I decided I wouldn't be selfish, and I would help my family. Instead of going to college, I started working in our diner on wheels. My life changed completely. Cooking and selling hamburgers and French fries was terribly boring. So, to make things a little more interesting, I started to watch video lessons about hot cuisine, and I cooked delicious dishes over my breaks. However, my parents didn't like my new hobby. "Stop wasting the products that we're buying for the diner. We're barely making ends meet as it is." Damn it, almost everything I liked was being taken away from me. But my problems didn't end there. Soon, all my school friends left for college. My boyfriend, Harry, also went to study in another city, and he said before leaving that long-distance relationships just weren't for him. I was terribly sad. I was left with no friends and none of my favorite hobbies. The only thing that could cheer me up was the fast food that we were selling. After years of this lifestyle, I gained a decent amount of weight. But so what? The diner on wheels was doing great, and soon it turned into a whole chain. My family and I were able to move back into a big, beautiful house. But I kept on working because I had no other hobbies besides food. Mia had grown up and become a real school queen. Everyone admired her figure and couldn't believe we were sisters. How could such a beautiful girl have a sister like that? The taunts of strangers didn't bother me much, though. However, it really hurt my feelings to hear the mocking words of my sister that I'd sacrificed so much for. It's honestly a wonder that she hasn't eaten me yet. That was going way too far. One day, our parents opened another diner and invited us to an amusement park to celebrate it. It was a good idea, but I had to listen to Mia talk about herself the whole evening. I get to be class president soon. After all, nobody can compare to me. And we also have a young student teacher at our school. He's so cute. At the end of the evening, Dad suggested we go on a ride designed for 4 people. My parents and my sister calmly walked into the cabin, but the operator didn't want to let me through. I'm sorry, there's a weight limit for this attraction. I didn't get upset though. I knew I could just eat a hot dog while my family was on the ride. But Dad solved the issue by giving the operator a discount coupon for the diner. And so I joined my family. Mia was terribly afraid of heights.
So for 15 minutes, I enjoyed the view of the city in complete silence. However, when it came time to get out of the cabin, something truly embarrassing happened to me. I got stuck in the stupid narrow chair. Dad and the park worker pulled me by the hands, but nothing seemed to help. They had to call a technician to come and loosen the restraints. I wanted to sink through the floor when everyone in the queue for the ride started laughing and taking pictures of me. The worst part was when Mia joined in and took a selfie with me.
I think I'll caption it. Someone's been eating too much.
When I was finally free, I ran away from that humiliation and I hid in the emptiest parts of the park so I wouldn't have to hear those taunts anymore. Hey, who's crying there? There. I looked up and I saw a guy in a clown costume next to me. This was just what I needed. He pulled a handkerchief out of his sleeve and handed it to me. I grabbed it and an endless string of multicolored scarves started to come out of his sleeve. I couldn't help but laugh, and I told the kind clown that I had no friends and I was constantly bullied because of my weight. The clown made a flower out of balloons for me, and he said I'd be fine. The important thing was not to despair, and that was nice of him, but his smile was painted on. So I decided to do something that would really cheer me up. Take revenge on Mia. In the morning, I went to her school. I often met Mia after classes, so the security guards recognized me and let me in. I quickly snuck into the teacher's room and I rigged the results of the election so Mia would lose. That's more like it. This will definitely teach you a lesson, sis. All that was left to do was to leave unnoticed, and so I ran out of the office. Unfortunately, I pushed the door so hard that I hit some guy. Imagine my surprise when I realized that I had knocked down my ex-boyfriend Harry. During the time that we hadn't seen each other, he had grown even more handsome. Meanwhile, I looked. So I was glad that he didn't recognize me. I wondered what he was doing there. Watch where you're going. The bell rang and the students noisily poured out into the hallways. Mia and her classmates clung to Harry from all sides and addressed him as a teacher. So he was the young teacher that Mia had been talking about. What a twist! I came back home in high spirits because something good had finally happened to me again. Since Harry was back in town, we could date again. Only first, I needed to lose a lot of weight. I absolutely couldn't let Harry see me before that. I took my mission seriously. I adopted a strict diet that same day. Instead of pizza and chips, I would eat only fruits and vegetables. Polly, are you sick? We're having dinner, but you've barely touched your food. I told her that as soon as I lost weight, I would be dating Harry again. Mia couldn't resist making a sarcastic comment when she heard that.
You wouldn't last a week on such a strict diet.
Yeah, we'll see. The next day, Mia came back from school angry and upset because she had lost the election. And to cheer herself up, my sister decided to ruin my mood. Mia saw how hard it was for me to follow the diet, but she still brought home fast food from our diner, and she started to devour it in front of my eyes while I was failing to enjoy an apple. Put it away. It's hard enough for me as it is.
Sounds like a you problem. You're gonna snap soon anyway. Might as well happen now.
I got so angry at my sister, and I told her that she had lost her election thanks to me. You always get lucky. So how about you feel what it's like to be a loser for once in your life? We argued until our parents came home, and then we locked ourselves in our rooms. I wasn't ashamed at all, though. Mia had never been denied anything in her entire life. Someone had to put her in her place. Although it wasn't easy, I lasted on the diet for 2 weeks. Finally, I decided to weigh myself and see the results. But the thing was, impossible! I gained even more weight? I was gonna start crying, but suddenly I felt Mia's hand on my shoulder.
Oh, don't give up, Polly. It's just that a diet alone isn't enough.
And Mia suggested running together in the mornings. I hadn't expected her to support me like this, and I felt really happy. So the very next morning, we went for a run in the park. Mia floated along like a butterfly, but every movement was hard for me. I even fell into a puddle once. And then the most terrible thing possible happened. Harry was at the park. Mia greeted him happily and thanked him for telling her about the benefits of morning running.
My fat sister and I also wanted to follow your example.
Harry stared at me. This time, definitely recognized me. Polly? It can't be. What happened to you? And that's when it dawned on me that Mia's support was fake. She had taken me for a run so that Harry would see me. If it hadn't been for Harry being there, I would have pounced on her. Let's have dinner this weekend and catch up. Even though Mia had set me up, everything had turned out pretty well. Harry asked me out on a date. Maybe I shouldn't have worried about the diet so much. I bought a new dress of Harry's favorite color for the dinner, and on the evening of the date, I spent 2 hours making my hair and putting on my makeup. Now I just have to put on the dress and I'll be ready. I felt that something was wrong at once. I couldn't zip up the dress, and then I actually heard it rip while I was wearing it. Was I still gaining weight? I decided I was not gonna let it ruin my evening, and I went to the date in ordinary clothes. But things didn't go according to plan. Harry, I'm so glad you're back. We can start dating again. Yeah, I'm glad to see you too, but you don't actually think I'm gonna date someone like you, right? Someone like me? I was such an idiot. Harry had invited me just so he could brag about his achievements and tell stories from college. I shouldn't have daydreamed so much. I was so hurt that I left the dinner and I ran into the street in tears. I was crying on an empty bus stop when some guy came up to me. Why are you crying all the time? I didn't want to talk to some weirdo on top of everything else. I told the guy that he must have mistaken me for someone else because we didn't know each other. We met in the amusement park. I was in a clown costume. Remember? My name is Jim. Well, he was surprisingly cute when he wasn't dressed like a clown. Jim and I got to talking while we were waiting for the bus. He turned out to be not only a funny clown, but also a pretty nice guy. Everyone has their own vocation. Mine, for example, is making people laugh. Once you find your own, you'll stop crying because of people who aren't even worth your tears. I smiled, and feeling grateful for his support, I said Jim should come to our diner sometime. I came home terribly hungry. I found the most unhealthiest foods I could, and I started eating them in front of Mia. That's what she wanted, right? So I thought that she would gloat and be happy about it. What happened to your diet? You were trying so hard. No matter what I do, I keep gaining weight. So what's the point? I'll just eat whatever I want. But Mia guiltily lowered her eyes and said that that was because of her. I'm sorry, Polly. I ate junk food in front of you on purpose. I broke the scales so they would add 7 pounds to the weight they showed. And then I also changed the dress to one a few sizes smaller so you would think that you were having no results. Anyway, I was a really terrible sister, and I didn't realize how much you had sacrificed for me. So that's the reason? She was my sister, though. I couldn't stay angry with her forever, so I asked for her forgiveness as well. We hugged, and we promised to support each other from then on. Now that Mia had told me the truth, I wanted to stick to the diet again, even though giving up delicious food was incredibly hard. One evening, when the diner was closing, I saw a big balloon at the window, and I immediately realized it was Jim. Boo! How are you doing, Polly? Will you treat a clown to something delicious? Oh, I'm so glad to see you! But it's actually closing time. We're pretty much out of food. He shrugged and said he'd come back another time. But how could I let him go hungry? Every time we'd met, he had been so kind, and he helped me smile through my tears. Don't go anywhere, actually. I'll think of something. I had to experiment a little, but I still managed to create a real culinary masterpiece from just some simple products. Still, I hadn't watched those video lessons for nothing. Jim tried it and shouted enthusiastically, "Polly, this is amazing! Trust me, this is your calling!" And that's when I realized Jim was right. Cooking brought me joy, and I'd always hated that healthy foods for diets were always so boring and tasteless. So, with Jim's support, I developed an amazing menu for losing weight. And now, I didn't have to choose between eating tasty food and healthy food. I decided that my experience could be useful for a lot of people, and I started to post my cooking tutorials myself. That turned out to be a great idea. My channel became really popular. Polly, we shouldn't have forbidden you from cooking what you wanted. Instead of a new diner, we would like for you to open a healthy food restaurant. Would you be willing to become its head chef? For the first time in a long time, I finally felt like I was in the right place. A delicious and healthy diet quickly helped me get back into shape. And like all sisters, Mia and I sometimes fight. But now, it's only about small things. And recently, they had an open lesson at her school and discussed the topic of someone I'm proud of. Mia invited me to speak in front of her classmates and tell my story. I was really happy. I ran into Harry by chance that same day. His eyes were shining with delight. Polly, you changed so much. What do you think about dinner on Friday? Sorry, Harry, I can't. I'm going on a date with Jim that day. Everyone can lose their way. If you're lucky, you'll have a loyal friend and an understanding family that will stay by you during the hard times. Have you ever treated your siblings unfairly? Tell us in the comments down below.
In a week, 10 students have to go to the ski resort. Here's the money for the job. We'll take care of the rest. Don't worry, you can count on me. Hi, I'm Bella. I had a classmate called Will. He was absolutely perfect. Handsome, from a rich family, his dad worked on television. Will was my crush, but not only mine. A bunch of girls were constantly following him. And you know what the strangest thing was? He was best friends with Alex, the biggest bully at school. He often picked on me and pissed me off. One day, the principal announced that the school had a new sponsor who had decided to give us a cool gift. 10 random students would be chosen, and they would spend their holidays in a ski resort. Wow, I really wanted to go, but didn't think I would be chosen. I never got lucky. A large balloon filled with notes with names was placed in the assembly hall. The principal took out the papers one by one, and my heart sank every time. What if I got lucky after all? It's hard to believe it, but I really did get chosen. When the principal said my name, I couldn't believe my ears. Hooray! It would be the best vacation ever. I didn't sleep a wink before the trip. Will was going to, and I hoped he would finally notice me. We boarded a bus early in the morning and headed up the mountains. The principal was supposed to spend the holidays with us. Unfortunately, Alex turned out to be going too, and that put a damper on things. The ski resort turned out to be really cool. We were brought to a cottage with a swimming pool, a billiard room, and even hot springs. I ended up sharing a room with Araya. She was a friend of mine, and we got along quite well. We met our guide right after check-in. He showed us around and then told us a story. Once upon a time, a group of tourists went missing here. All their things were where they'd left them, but the people disappeared without a trace. Of course, it's completely safe here now, and you have nothing to be afraid of. Still, you should be careful. What nonsense. It was probably just an urban myth made up to attract more tourists. We got in the lift and went up to the mountain. Everyone immediately started to ski or snowboard. I didn't know how to do either. Seeing how cool Will looked on a snowboard, I also picked one up. However, when I tried to go down a slope, I failed. I got stuck in the snow and couldn't get up. Of course, everyone immediately started laughing at me. Alex suddenly got down to me and held out his hand. He helped me up and I was about to thank him when he made a hurtful joke. Did you decide to demonstrate the grace of a hippo? Congratulations. You did. Everyone laughed at me. I didn't want to embarrass myself any further, so I found an instructor and asked him to teach me. In the evening, everyone gathered at the cottage. Well, almost everyone. For some reason, the principal wasn't there. He didn't show up the next morning either, but that didn't bother anyone. We only got a little worried when the principal didn't show up even at lunch. Where was he? He was supposed to be looking after us. We went to his room and saw that all of his things were still there, so the principal hadn't left. Do you remember the guy telling us about what happened to that group of tourists? He shouldn't have said that. Everyone immediately felt uneasy. Alex wasn't the only one who grinned. That's as likely as our principal being abducted by aliens. Don't worry, he'll come back. Nothing happened to him. After lunch, I decided to practice with the instructor some more. He showed me how to snowboard correctly, and I tried to follow his instructions. However, then I noticed a suspicious person nearby. He kept peeking out from behind the trees and then quickly hiding. It seemed he didn't want to be noticed. I got distracted looking at him and fell. After I got up, he was no longer there. The principal did not appear the next day either, and we told the guide about it. We expected him to call the police or at least organize a search party. However, the guide just waved us off. Your principal is an adult. Who knows what he's doing? After giving it a little more thought, we agreed with him and decided to fully enjoy our freedom. Will suggested we throw a pool party. I wanted to look beautiful and spent the whole day preparing. Standing by the pool, I even decided to flirt with Will. Just imagine, he flirted back. He looked me up and down and suddenly complimented me. I've never seen you in a swimsuit before. Bella, you have a great figure. I was over the moon. The other girls looked at me with envy. Even Araya. She liked Will too. I was chatting with him when the lights suddenly went out. It was completely dark. I hadn't had the time to get my bearings yet when someone suddenly pushed me into the pool. Oh no, I couldn't swim at all. After swallowing a lot of water, I started to sink and thought it was the end. I had almost fainted when someone grabbed me and started pulling me up. I woke up on the side of the pool. The lights were already on, my classmates were fooling around in the water, and Alex was leaning over me. I realized that he had pulled me out of the water. Bravo, you showed off your talent again. Very graceful. Everyone laughed, and I wanted to hit Alex with something heavy. He had probably pushed me into the pool to make fun of me later. Why wouldn't he leave me alone? By the way, people, what happened to the lights? It's probably just a power outage. When I got to my feet, Will asked me how I was feeling. Everyone immediately stopped giggling, and the girls looked at me with envy again. I suddenly noticed that 2 of them were missing. I asked the others about it, and we started looking for them. We went around the whole cottage and looked for them outside, but the girls were nowhere to be found. It no longer felt fun, and we went to bed. They still weren't back the next morning. Their things were lying where they had left them, the same as the principal's. Strange. Where had they gone off to? Everyone was in low spirits. Only Alex was joking around as usual. It annoyed me terribly. Was he ever serious? Will, on the other hand, was acting like a real hero and a leader. He suggested we talk to the guide again. However, when we came to the guide's house, the door was locked. There was no signal in the mountains, and we couldn't call the missing girls. Araya came up to me in the afternoon. She asked me what I thought about the disappearances. It's all so weird, but I think they just left. Maybe something happened at home, so they didn't have the time to gather their things? It was a stretch, but I had no other explanation. It wasn't like they could have really been abducted by aliens. I saw someone in the woods, some suspicious-looking guys. They were climbing trees and looked like they didn't want to be noticed. I immediately remembered the man I had seen while training with the instructor. He had also acted suspiciously. What if there was a gang of criminals operating there that kidnapped people? Such thoughts made me really worried. I decided to go practice to get my mind off things. And you know what? The instructor wasn't there. Were they kidding us? I was looking around in confusion when Alex came up to me. What, no instructor either? This is getting weird. Have you noticed that there aren't that many people here anymore? Of course I noticed. When we had arrived, there had been a lot of people snowboarding and skiing on the slope, and now there were only a few of them left. Alex suddenly suggested he train me instead of the instructor. To hear you make fun of my gracefulness again? No thanks. I started snowboarding on my own and, of course, almost fell. Alex quickly caught up to me, but this time he didn't laugh. He showed me a couple of techniques and I felt more confident. Alex couldn't be helping me out of the goodness of his heart. There had to be some kind of catch. Why are you being so kind? Maybe I just like you. Not his stupid jokes again. When it got dark, we headed down. The lift suddenly creaked loudly and stopped. We were stuck at a huge height with no way to jump down. Soon, strange flashes of light appeared nearby. I immediately imagined all sorts of horrors and felt terrified. Alex was joking around and making everything seem even more creepy. I couldn't help but burst into tears. He realized that he had gone too far and tried to calm me down. If only Will had been there instead. It was cold by the time the lift started working again. It jerked so sharply that I cried out in surprise. After coming back to the cottage, I immediately went to bed. In the morning, I noticed a note by Araya's bed. After reading it, I couldn't believe my eyes. Araya had written that she had some suspicions about what was going on. She had gone into the woods the night before to see if she was right. My hands shook and the note fell to the floor. Had Araya gone to the forest? Alone? Was she crazy? I ran to the living room and showed the note to the others. We have to find her. Let's go to the forest. Now I was the one being called crazy. Some even twirled their fingers at the temples. Don't you see what's going on? People are going missing. We need to get out of here before anything happens to us. But we couldn't leave. First of all, we didn't have a driver's license. Secondly, we didn't have a car. Walking through the resort, we saw several empty cars, but there were no owners nearby. It felt like we were the only people left there. As we were walking back to the cottage, Will suddenly stopped. You know, I agree with Bella. We need to go to the forest. A lot of people were too afraid to go, and we had to split up. Will, Alex, and I went into the woods, and the others stayed in the cottage. The GPS wasn't working, so we had to memorize the way. We walked through a snowy forest. It was cold and scary. All of a sudden, something flashed behind the trees. Will and Alex immediately ran in that direction. I wanted to run after them, but Will told me to stay put. Minutes kept ticking by, but they didn't come back. It took everything I had not to panic. Eventually, I decided to go back to the resort and call for help. However, after walking for some time, I realized I was lost. Heck, I must have chosen the wrong direction. It quickly got dark in the mountains. Night was beginning to fall. I remembered a movie in which people dug a cave in the snow so as not to freeze. I decided to do the same. I was almost done when Alex appeared next to me. I'd never been happier to see him. Will and I were together at first, but then we got lost. I didn't know where I was, and some guy in a weird mask started chasing me. It seems like I managed to break away from him, and I came here and found you by accident. Together, we climbed into the snow cave and hugged to keep warm. Alex talked to me to help me get distracted, and his jokes no longer annoyed me. Suddenly, someone came up to the cave. Alex was about to go see who it was, but I grabbed his hand, terrified. He smiled encouragingly at me and looked out anyway. It was Will! He said he hadn't found anyone and had come back to the place where we had got separated, but there had been no one there. After that, he wandered through the forest until he came across our cave. Luckily, Will remembered the way back, and we decided to go back to the cottage. On the way there, Will praised my courage. "You did well. You didn't get lost. And you also dug a cave in the snow. I wouldn't have thought of that." I felt very flattered by his words. When we got back to the cottage, there was no one there. No one at all. Can you imagine? They were all gone. The three of us were the only ones left. I almost grew hysterical, but then I reminded myself once again that I needed to hold on. We sat in the living room and tried to think of what to do. All of a sudden, the lights went out again. We heard footsteps by the door, and then someone walked into the living room. Alex grabbed my arm and dragged me into the next room. Will ran after us but fell behind. I felt for the switch on the wall and turned on the light in the room. Alex and I turned around and saw a guy in a scary mask. He quickly cornered us. We had nowhere to run. Now, we were definitely done for. Alex stood in front of me and prepared to fight. But then, Will crept up to the guy and pulled off his mask. To say that Alex and I were stunned would be to say nothing. Under the mask was our principal. The next second, we heard loud music and a crowd of people poured into the cottage. Among them were our missing classmates and cameramen. It turned out that our group participated in a reality show. Will's father, who worked on TV, had come up with the idea for it. He had come to our principal and even paid to help him organize everything. Our parents had also been warned, and they had signed permits. We had been monitored by psychologists the entire time. If something had gone wrong, the show would have been stopped immediately. The cameramen had been hanging cameras in the forest. They were the ones Araya and I had seen. The flashes had also been from cameras. Such news made my head spin. I was shocked. How could my parents have agreed to such a thing? We had been so scared. However, everyone else was delighted, especially when they found out that the show would be shown on a well-known TV channel a lot of young people watched. We were interviewed. It turned out that Will had known about everything from the very beginning. That's why he had become our leader and acted so bravely. Then, there was a gala dinner for us and the film crew. Will's father answered our questions. We left those who were more interesting to watch until the final. At first, we planned to leave only Will and Alex, but Bella proved herself well. Araya also turned out to be brave, but she quickly figured out what was going on and found cameras in the forest, so we had to take her out of the game. After dinner, I asked him another question. I wanted to know who had pushed me into the pool at the party. I was shown a recording from a night vision camera, and I saw that the one who pushed me into the water had been Araya, the one person I hadn't suspected. We talked, and she told me that she had just been jealous of me. She liked Will too, and he had started paying attention to me. Araya admitted that she had been wrong and shouldn't have done it. The next day, we came back home. I was enjoying some peace and quiet when Will suddenly called me. He said that he really admired my courage and asked me out. Just a week ago, I would have been delighted. But at that moment, I realized I had got over him. His heroism turned out to be fake, and I told him no. Will sighed and suddenly confessed something. The names of the participants hadn't been chosen randomly. You weren't supposed to go, but Alex asked for you. He's my friend, so I agreed. What? Alex had asked for me? But why? In the evening, I went for a walk. I was wandering the city, lost in thought, and didn't notice anything around me. As I was crossing the road, I suddenly heard the screech of brakes. A car was driving toward me at full speed, and I didn't have time to jump away. But then, someone bumped into me and pushed me aside. I fell on the sidewalk. Alex was leaning over me. You again? Well, someone had to save you. You have an amazing talent for getting into trouble. I suddenly realized that, unlike Will, Alex had never pretended. He really had acted like a hero. He suddenly leaned in and kissed me. Actually, I wasn't joking in the mountains. I've liked you for a long time. That's probably why I acted like an idiot. My heart suddenly felt very light. I smiled and joked. You've saved me so many times already, but you've become my guardian angel. Alex smiled too. You know what? I don't mind that. When the show aired, we all became very popular, especially the final 3 participants. Will and I are still friends. Alex and I are dating, and I still jokingly call him my guardian angel. Do you have such a guardian angel as well? Tell us in the comments down below.
Hi, I'm Angela. Some time ago, my boyfriend Luke and I went to a summer camp. I liked it there, and I even made a friend. Stacy, Luke, and I hung out all the time, and everything was fine. Until one day when something terrible happened. During a bonfire party, I suddenly saw Luke and Stacy together. They weren't just chatting or cuddling in a friendly way, but kissing. Can you imagine? My boyfriend was kissing another girl. Of course, I immediately took him aside, threw a fit, and demanded an explanation. His answer shocked me. I'm sorry, but we need to break up. I finally met the girl of my dreams, and that's Stacy. What? Stacy was the girl of his dreams? What was I, chopped liver? I burst into tears and I begged Luke not to dump me. He was so important to me and I didn't want to lose him. But Luke remained adamant. He had already turned around to leave when, to my own surprise, I blurted out, "I'm pregnant." Luke turned around and looked at me in shock. Of course, because of that news, he changed his mind about breaking up with me. For the rest of our time at camp, Luke took care of me and constantly asked me how I was feeling. Wow, I really hadn't expected that little lie to work so well. When the holidays came to an end, we went back to college. At first, everything was going fine. But soon, Luke began to suspect something. One day, he came up to me and told me all his doubts. "You're going to gym classes just like usual. You have no baby bump, and I've never even seen you throw up. Did you lie to me?" I got scared, but I pretended to be offended. Pregnancy is different for everyone. As for gym class, you know our coach. If I skipped even one class, he would immediately fail me. Luke looked at me uncertainly. He didn't seem to know whether to believe me or not. So I decided to go further. I clutched my stomach, doubled over, and groaned. Luke immediately helped me sit down. "What is it? Are you feeling sick? Should I call an ambulance?" I exhaled slowly and assured him that it had already passed. I could probably become an actress because after that, Luke finally believed me. A few days later, I started putting a soft toy under my clothes, but I soon realized that it was inconvenient and didn't look very good. So I ordered a fake belly on the internet. Everyone started to go easy on me in college. Even the coach just let me sit on the bench during classes. I was liking the life of a pregnant woman more and more by the minute. One day, when I got home, I went up to my room. When I grabbed the railing, my fingers got stuck. The railing had been smeared with something sticky. And I immediately realized that my insufferable brother was pulling another prank. "Ollie, get over here right now!" When my brother saw me, he burst out laughing. We started to argue, and our parents heard us shouting. I ratted Ollie out, and they made him clean up and wash the dishes every day as punishment. Speaking of our parents, more than anything, I was afraid of rumors about my pregnancy reaching them. I would be finished. I tried to be careful, but eventually I got busted. That morning, I waited until my parents had left for work like usual. Then, I quickly got ready for college and began to put on my false belly. All of a sudden, Ollie came into my room. That brat was skipping school. When he saw me, he froze with his mouth wide open. And you know what sucked the most? My brother had always been quick-witted, and he immediately figured out what was going on. Well. Pretending to be pregnant? Lying to your boyfriend? I gritted my teeth with anger. I could not afford to fight with him. It's a secret. Please, don't tell anyone. Ollie grinned slyly. Okay, I won't, but you'll have to do whatever I want. I really had no choice, so I agreed. That evening, my brother demanded that I clean up and wash the dishes for him. After coming back from college, I had to forget about how tired I was and do all the housework for him. Our parents noticed, but didn't mind. They were just happy that we had finally stopped fighting. Ollie was constantly asking me to buy things for him, and I spent almost all of my money on him. My brother was infuriating, but I had to bite my tongue and bear it. One day, Luke said he had signed me up for a pregnancy course and suggested that we attend it together. I was afraid that I might get busted there, but I had to go so I wouldn't arouse suspicion. On the way, Luke told me he had started looking for a job. He was going to drop out of college. I have to earn money to protect you and our child. Maybe you should wait. No, I'm ready to take responsibility for our family. That really bothered me. I had never thought he would take this so seriously. However, when we came to the course, Ollie suddenly called me and demanded that I come home immediately. I told that brat I was busy, but he reminded me of our little agreement. I had to tell Luke that my brother wasn't feeling well and I had to go home. Of course, Luke wanted to come with me, but I convinced him to stay. When I got home, I found out that our parents had left for a few days, and Ollie had thrown a party, invited a bunch of friends, and made a mess. Damn, I had just cleaned up. Ollie suddenly turned the music down and handed me a maid costume with a chuckle. Dear sister, tonight you get to be our maid. Change your clothes and get to work. I wanted to kill him. What nerve! I protested. But Ollie came closer and whispered in my ear, "Maybe I should tell Luke your little secret." There was nothing I could do, so I agreed. I spent the evening serving Ollie and his friends drinks, warming their food, cleaning up, and listening to their stupid jokes. The party was in full swing when I accidentally saw Luke through the window, and a few seconds later, the doorbell rang. Oh, damn it, what was he doing there? I asked my brother to get the door, and I rushed upstairs, changed my clothes, and put back on the fake belly. Then I went back to the living room and found Luke there. It turned out he'd brought me the materials from the course. I didn't want you to push yourself too far sitting at a computer, so I printed out the electronic manual. I thanked him, and I tried to get him to leave, but Ollie intervened and started to get on my nerves. He started giving Luke hints that my stomach wasn't real. Luckily, Luke didn't figure it out. I told him I was exhausted, and I finally pushed him out the door. Then, I ripped my brother a new one and kicked his friends out. Ollie got angry and said he'd rat me out, but I said he should keep his mouth shut if he knew it was good for him. The next day, everyone in college began to rehearse a play. They were staged quite often in our college, but I never participated. Everything was going just as usual, and nothing foreshadowed trouble. Luke stayed late after classes, and I went home alone. I was walking down the street when I suddenly noticed a familiar car coming toward me. Those were my parents. But Ollie said they wouldn't be back until that night. Had he lied to me? I didn't have time to hide or take off my stomach. They got out of the car, and I saw a nastily grinning Ollie behind them. "Honey, we got back early and decided to pick you up." And noticing my stomach, she broke off and clutched at her heart. Dad looked at me, horrified. "What is this?" I had to very quickly come up with an explanation. I got a role as a pregnant woman in a play. I was at rehearsal and didn't have time to change yet. My parents breathed a sigh of relief. They praised me and said they would look forward to the premiere. I was afraid that Ollie would give me away, but he didn't say anything. He was probably just deciding to blackmail me more. Luke and I went to the pregnancy course almost every day. They told me how to breathe properly during childbirth, how to swaddle babies, and so on. It made me so nervous. What was I supposed to do when it was time to, give birth? One day, Luke asked me over to meet his parents. To say that I was nervous would be like saying nothing. I was imagining every possible bad scenario. And you know what? I was very right to worry. During the dinner, Luke's mom suddenly asked to talk to me in private. "Are you not ashamed of yourself, ruining our son's life? He's dropping out of college and starting work because of you. And, what about the baby? You're still children yourselves. How could you be parents?" I was confused and I didn't know what to say. If only she knew that Luke was dropping out of college for nothing. There was no child. Luke suddenly came up to us. He had heard our conversation and decided to step in. "Mom, don't you dare talk to Angela like that. She's family now and you and Dad will have to accept it." He took my hand and led me away. His dad tried to stop him, but Luke wouldn't listen. I wanted to sink through the floor. Luke's mom was right. First, he had dropped out of college. Now he was arguing with his parents. And it was all because of my lies. When I got home, I paced the room nervously. Things had gone way past too far, and I had no idea what to do. Over the weekend, Ollie demanded I take him to an amusement park. While my brother was on a roller coaster, I was waiting for him on the ground. Someone suddenly called me by the name. "Angela!" Damn it, it was Luke. I was terrified. Of course, I hadn't worn the fake belly for a walk with my brother. Luke's voice had come from behind me, so he hadn't seen my stomach yet. Without turning around, I ran forward and got lost in the crowd. He was shouting something after me, but I pretended not to hear. After locking myself in the women's bathroom, I texted my brother to go home without me. After waiting for about a half an hour, I cautiously looked around outside. After making sure that Luke was nowhere to be seen, I went home too. I was sitting in my room when someone suddenly slammed the front door. I then heard voices. Ollie had come back, but he wasn't alone. Luke was with him. One day, I would kill my little brother. Putting on my belly, I went downstairs. It turned out that Ollie had told Luke that I had suddenly felt sick, and so that was why I'd gone home. I had to play along. Yeah, I didn't feel that well, but I'm fine now. Luke wanted to take me to the doctor at once, and I just barely talked him out of it. Then he said he'd wait for my parents and officially meet them. Unable to stand it, I freaked out and asked him to leave. At first, Luke looked hurt, but then he smiled. mood swings are normal in your condition. I understand. In fact, he was so understanding that it made me sick. I pushed Luke out the door, snapped at Ollie, and locked myself in my room. I was just so tired of all of this. I suddenly realized that I didn't like Luke as much as I'd used to. His suffocating care annoyed me, but he had sacrificed so much for me that I didn't know how to tell him the truth about everything. Falling face down on the bed, I burst into tears and spent almost the entire night crying. Just a couple of days after that, there was the first premiere of the play from our college. Luke had convinced me to go. We came to the hall just before the start and found empty seats. All of a sudden, my parents sat down next to us. What were they doing there? Damn it. I had lied to them about getting a role and I completely forgot.
Angela, why are you still here and not backstage?
Right. I was just about to go there. I grabbed Luke by the arm and dragged him away. Backstage, the play's director immediately approached us and said that only participants were allowed there. He wanted to kick us out, but I was quicker. Guess what I did? I ran out onto the stage with real actors. I had to improvise and find a way to join the performance. And by the way, props to the actors who played along with everything, acting like it was normal. After that, I quietly left the stage and the director immediately began to scold me. Ignoring him, I found Luke and dragged him away from the hall. However, my parents suddenly caught up to us by the door. My role in the play was really small, so we can go home. My parents didn't suspect anything and just praised me for my acting skills. I had only just relaxed when Luke ruined everything. Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, I've been wanting to meet you for a long time. I promise I'll take good care of Angela and our future child. My parents froze with stony faces. They looked at us, confused. Then, Mom asked in a trembling voice, "Your child? Angela, are you pregnant after all?" At that moment, I wanted to disappear. Everyone expected some sort of explanation from me, but I had told so many lies that I couldn't find a way to come up with another one. Lifting up my t-shirt, I took off my fake belly and, with tears in my eyes, told them everything from the very beginning. The more I talked, the paler Luke got. He was absolutely shocked, and I didn't know how to look him in the eye. I felt terribly ashamed of myself, and I ran away. When I got home, I locked myself in my room again. Eventually, I calmed down, and I felt relieved that my lies had finally been exposed. I would not have to deceive anyone anymore. But I still felt guilty, and I tried to think of ways to make it up to Luke. I was looking through my phone one day when I found Stacy's number. Oh, you know, the girl from camp that Luke had fallen in love with. I texted her and asked if she still liked Luke. When Stacy said yes, I said that he was free now, and I told her to call him. Soon, I heard rumors about Stacy and Luke dating, and I felt a little less guilty. Things got better, and even Ollie had stopped bothering me. But one day, something happened that turned my world upside down again. On that day, after a lecture, Luke suddenly came up to me and asked me to talk. He'd brought me to a square where musicians were performing my favorite song. I tensed up. What was happening? I've had a lot of time to think on everything. I appreciate that you went to such lengths to keep me. Of course, it was a terrible thing to do, but I'm ready to forgive you. Luke suddenly got down on one knee and showed me a ring. I want us to be a real family and have a baby. This is my real dream, Angela. Will you marry me? I was so shocked that I didn't know how to react. I couldn't believe that this was happening. I asked him for some time to think about it. I still can't decide what to do. I don't know how I feel about Luke anymore, or even what I want. What do you think I should do? Should I say yes?
Hi, I'm Jasper. Since I was a kid, my parents had been preparing me to take over the family business. We had everything, and such a life might seem perfect. But I dreamed of becoming an artist and applied to a school of art in secret. When I got a notification saying I had been accepted, I couldn't believe my eyes. I was happy, but my parents threw a fit. Mom burst into tears. Dad went ballistic. "If you go to that school, we will no longer support you." That same day, I packed up and left home. The school was in another city. I booked a ticket and got to the dorms by the evening. Looking forward to a new life, I went up to the porch when I suddenly heard the roar of an engine. I turned around and saw a bike speeding up towards the dorms at high speed. It skidded and the biker fell off. Scared, I ran up to him to help. But then, the biker suddenly jumped to his feet, took off his helmet, and I realized it was a girl. For some reason, her face seemed familiar to me. Where could we have met? The girl suddenly bombarded me with accusations. Why were you standing in the middle of the road? I almost crashed because of you. Unbelievable. I had been standing by the door and hadn't even been in her way at all. But I didn't have time to say anything. She jumped back on the bike and drove away. Then a guy came up to me and told me not to mind her. That was Lucia. She's a real rebel. She's so mean, even boys try not to mess with her. I'm Kit, by the way. It turned out that Keith and I were roommates. After checking in, I turned on my laptop and registered on a website for freelancers. I needed money and hoped I would be offered a job soon. I quickly grew to love school, but I was running out of money and my job hunt wasn't going great. I worried about it a lot. But one day, my art history teacher came up to me. Mr. Allen had seen my profile on the website and asked me to paint him a picture for a good fee. I was shocked. I see that you are in a tough spot and want to support you. Besides, I like your style. I was very grateful to him. From that day on, I stayed late at school and started working on the painting. Instead of my usual paints, I used spray cans. I also borrowed a special varnish from Kit. One day, I was staying late in the workshop, as usual, when I suddenly heard loud voices. I looked out into the hallway and saw Mr. Allen and Lucia. The girl was shouting at my teacher. How dare she talk to him like that? After throwing a fit, Lucia left. As she was passing by me, I couldn't help but stop her. Are you crazy? Why did you talk to Mr. Allen like that? None of your business. Stay out of it. The school was closed for the night, and I kept working in the common living room of the dorm. I finished the painting, varnished it, and was going to use fire. It was my special technique, and usually everything worked out fine. But that time, something went wrong. The flames were too strong. What the hell? I managed to jump aside, but the fire had already spread to the curtains and carpet. The fire alarm went off, and the other students and our residence hall director came running to the living room. The fire was quickly dealt with, but I was accused of violating safety rules. The next day, they debated whether I should be expelled or not. But in the end, I was just kicked out of the dorm. I didn't understand what had happened. The fire shouldn't have been that strong. Unless someone had messed with my materials. Kit had given me the varnish. Had he set me up? I found him in the dorm and questioned him. Kit denied everything, and we ended up fighting. I lost my only friend in town. I had almost no money left, and I barely scraped together enough to rent a tiny room. Difficult times began for me. I was desperate and ready to take any job when I suddenly got an offer. The customer wanted me to restore several paintings. I had a little experience with such work, but I hadn't worked with such expensive paintings yet. It was scary to take on such responsibility, but the payment was good, and I agreed. The customer talked to me over the phone, and the paintings were delivered by their assistant. I spent almost a whole week working on them. Everything was going great, but when I was almost finished, something happened. That day, when I walked into the room, I saw that the paintings had been cut with a knife. I was completely stunned. They cost a fortune. I noticed that the window was open. Someone must have gotten through it. But who would do it, and why? What was I supposed to do now? I was so anxious I couldn't sleep. The next morning, the customer called me. I had to admit that the paintings had been ruined. Of course, they got angry and demanded compensation. I took all my savings and sold everything I could. My headphones, Apple Watch, but it wasn't enough. Soon their assistant came to me and warned me that if I did not pay up soon, I would have big problems. I had no way of quickly earning so much money, so I decided to run away. I didn't have enough money to pay rent anyway, so I moved out. I had registered on a website using a pseudonym, so I hoped the customer wouldn't find me. Now, let's pause for a second. Remember how I said difficult times began for me? Forget it. That was the moment life got really hard. I had nowhere to go, and I was literally on the streets. I worked part-time as a loader at night, and went to school during the day and slept wherever I could. One day, they didn't pay me on time, and I didn't even have enough money for food. Staggering from fatigue, I wandered around the city and accidentally found myself in a weird area. I had no strength left, and I sat down right on the ground next to some abandoned building. Then I noticed some suspicious people heading toward me. It wasn't hard to guess what their intentions were. Most likely, they wanted to rob me. But since I had absolutely nothing they could take, they would probably just mock me. I was preparing for the worst when a bike suddenly drove into the alley at high speed. Those guys got scared and scattered. When the biker took off the helmet, I saw an angel. It was a girl in a white dress with wings on her back. Was I hallucinating? It was only when the girl leaned over that I recognized her as Lucia. She put her hands on her hips and glared at me, looking annoyed. Come with me. I was definitely hallucinating. I got on the bike behind her somehow. We arrived at a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. It was a complete mess. There were paintings and canvases with unfinished paintings lying around. Lucia turned on the microwave, cleared the table, and put a plate of hot food in front of me. I was so hungry that I immediately started chowing down. And then Lucia shocked me even more. If you have nowhere to go, you can stay here for now. I was so surprised I even choked. Why are you helping me all of a sudden? I'm kind by nature. Keep asking questions and you'll be back on the street. I didn't want that, so I kept all comebacks about her kindness to myself. From that day on, I started to live with her, but we hardly talked. Lucia didn't seem to notice that she had a roommate at all, so I was very surprised when one day she asked me for help. She was held up at school and asked me to get something for her. The place she sent me to turned out to be an advertising agency. There were different costumes in the box I was supposed to deliver. I realized that Lucia moonlighted as a commercial actress. That's why she had been wearing an angel costume the day she had saved me. I came back home and saw Lucia near the garbage cans. What was she doing there? As I got closer, I noticed stray dogs near her. Lucia was feeding them. She looked so cute that I felt lost. It wasn't like her at all. When Lucia noticed me, she immediately hid the dog food behind her back. There was an awkward pause. Coughing, I handed her the box. At home, we had dinner together for the first time. While Lucia was warming up the food, I realized that I had misunderstood what she was like. Her rudeness was just a defense mechanism, and she was actually kind. I wanted to get to know her better, but she kept shutting me out. One day, Lucia came home and told me that a graffiti contest was coming up. The winner would get a cash prize and a promising job. Lucia suggested we participate together. I loved the idea, and we started working on a sketch. Lucia had great ideas, and drawing with her turned out to be easy. When the sketch was completed, we found a building and started working. In a couple of weeks, the graffiti was ready. We stood in front of the painted wall, admiring our work. I hadn't expected it to look so cool. We got on the bike and were about to leave when I suddenly noticed some guys nearby. Among them was the assistant of the customer I had run away from. Damn it! They had found me after all. Looking right at us, the men came up to the graffiti, and that's when I noticed the buckets of paint in their hands. They were going to destroy our work. No, wait! Jumping off the bike, I ran up to them. They lowered the buckets to the ground. This is your last warning. If you don't repay the debt by the day after tomorrow, you'll go to jail. They left, and I grabbed my head. The day after tomorrow? Where was I supposed to get the money? Lucia suddenly put her hand on my shoulder. Don't worry, we'll figure something out. At that moment, something came over me. I don't even know where I found the courage for it, but I kissed her. At first, Lucia was confused, but then she suddenly kissed me back. Pulling away, I stroked her cheek. You are my angel. When we got home, my mom suddenly called me. Our family had been invited to an important event, and she asked me to go with them. At first, I wanted to refuse and almost hung up, but my mom was begging me so tearfully that I agreed in the end. Powerful businessmen and celebrities came to the event. I had already forgotten how to act at such parties and felt out of place. All sorts of people came up to us, but I didn't even try to remember their names. Then I saw a familiar face in the crowd. It was Mr. Allen. What was he doing there? Jasper, you've already met Mr. Allen, haven't you? He teaches you at school, but he's also a well-known collector. Mr. Allen, where is your daughter? A girl suddenly came up to my teacher. I gasped in surprise. It was Lucia. So she was Mr. Allen's daughter. I suddenly remembered where I had seen her before. One day, I had gone into the garden during a similar event and heard crying. A beautiful girl had been sitting at the side of the fountain. I had asked her why she was crying. She had said that her father constantly controlled her and forbade her from doing just about anything. I calmed her down and told her that she should make her own decisions. It was weird that it had taken me so long to remember that moment. Lucia wanted to say something, but Mr. Allen squeezed her hand and started to say goodbye to everyone. After they left, I decided to talk to Lucia at home. At the end of the evening, my father called me over to talk. I'm willing to forgive you and even pay off your debt if you drop out of school and come back. Hold on a sec. How did he even know about my debt? I had a terrible suspicion. Maybe the destroyed paintings had been his doing. When I asked him about it directly, he didn't even deny anything. Yes, Your mom and I did everything, so you would have no other choice but to come home. But your customer is a real person, and you still owe them money. I was furious but got a grip on myself. Instead of fighting my dad, I asked for an extension. All I need is a little more time. I can win the contest. Give me a chance to prove myself and repay the debt without your help. It took some convincing, but eventually my dad agreed. When I got home, Lucia wasn't there. She didn't show up at school the next day, and I got worried. The contest was already the next day, and we were supposed to present the painting together. After our lecture, I came to Mr. Allen and asked him about Lucia. She often runs off somewhere, don't worry. It felt like Mr. Allen was hiding something. I was walking down the hallway, lost in thought, when Kit suddenly came up to me. Are you looking for Lucia? I live near the Allens and saw her last night. I saw Mr. Allen dragging her into the house by force. I immediately asked him for the address, and Kit suggested we go together. On the way, we talked about what had really happened with the fire. Kit remembered that the varnish he had given me had been provided by Mr. Allen himself. I was shocked. So it was the teacher who had set me up. When I got to the right house, I called Lucia loudly. She immediately appeared in the window of the second floor, and then I noticed something terrible. There were bars on the window. It turned out that Mr. Allen had locked her in her room. Kit and I walked around the house and noticed that the window on the first floor was ajar. We climbed into the house, went up to the second floor, and opened Lucia's room. Luckily, the key had been left in the keyhole. We quickly left the house, came back to the apartment we were renting, and she told us everything. My father wants me to be his successor. When I was a kid, he would lock me in my room, make me memorize art history, and draw. I love to draw, but my father's tyranny put a damper on everything. One day, during an event, I was sitting in the garden and crying. That's when I met you, Jasper. Your words changed my life. I realized that something had to change and went against my father. I even acted in dumb commercials to earn money for rent. Lucia said that Mr. Allen had known my parents for a long time. Some time ago, they had come to him and asked him to make sure I would be expelled from school. But that hadn't worked out, and I had only been kicked out of the dorm. After that, Lucia started to watch over me and had come to the rescue when I was in a tight spot. You helped me, and I wanted to repay you in kind. I hugged her and promised her we would deal with everything together. And you know what? We did. The next day, we won the contest, and we were being awarded the prize. I saw my parents in the crowd. I was given the floor, and I made a speech looking right at them. We wanted our graffiti to show the freedom and uniqueness of each person. I hope that it will help other people accept me for who I am. To my surprise, my mom teared up, and Dad shook my hand after the award ceremony. You know, this contest opened my eyes. You will achieve everything in your own way. I believe in you, and I won't stand in your way anymore. Mr. Allen came up to us after my parents. It turned out that he had been my customer. I wasn't all that surprised and handed him an envelope with the money. But Lucia intervened. Actually, it was my father's assistant who broke into your room and ruined the paintings, so you don't owe him anything. Well, I think I agree with your parents, Jasper. Live as you see fit, and keep the money. Lucy and I didn't really believe him, but it didn't matter anymore. Thanks to our victory, we got cool jobs. We kept going to school and creating murals. Life got better, and I was happy. But one day, everything changed. That day, Lucia went to a meeting and didn't come home. She didn't show up at school either, and I had a horrible feeling of deja vu. My heart was pounding as I went to the dean and found out that Mr. Allen had quit. His house was empty. Lucia's phone was unavailable. I was sure that Mr. Allen had taken her somewhere again, so I asked my parents to use their connections to find her, but they didn't succeed. Or maybe they just lied to me because they didn't want to cross a powerful collector. But I won't give up. I can't live without Lucia, and I will definitely find my angel. Do you think I can do it? Write in the comments down below. I could use some kind words. If you're watching this, you've already breached the SCP Foundation protocols. Stay where you are. The cleanup team is on the way. In the meantime, you can watch stories of the people who were lucky enough to encounter the most anomalous SCP objects. When the Foundation staff arrives, you will be treated by Class A amnestics and you won't recall anything. This record will self-destruct in 3, 2, 1.